I'm calling to order the Planning Commission study session on June 13th, 2018. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance later. Yeah, let's do that later. Okay. So this is a study session on, I don't know what it's on. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes. Do we have a lecturer? Oh, do we have
a presenter from VTA?
We want to welcome up both Ron Gollum, who is the VTA Deputy Director of Real Estate and Joint Development, as well as Jill Gibson, who's the VTA's BART Phase 2 Project Planning and Programming Manager. They were kind enough at a kind of quick request from staff to provide the Planning Commission a study session on sort of the infrastructure planned in Santa Clara, as well as the opportunities to kind of leverage transit-oriented development. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks. Thanks for having us. Again, my name is Jill Gibson with VTA, the Planning and Programming Manager for the Phase 2 project. Good evening, and thanks for providing us this opportunity to discuss VTA's interest in supporting transit-oriented communities and the importance of development opportunities around the Santa Clara station. As you may know, VTA and the City of Santa Clara have a long history of collaboration to ensure that the Phase 2 project and transit-oriented development are well integrated and done right through the Santa Clara Station Area Plan, as well as other interactions, collaborations between VTA and the city. Tonight you're going to hear about the work VTA is doing in collaboration with Santa Clara City staff, which is really building upon the existing plans and policies that the city has, which emphasizes the importance of looking at TOD holistically, all the pieces, which includes, of course, transit service, which we'll talk about, land use and access to those transit services in nearby development. So the point of tonight is really that these synergies really matter, and it's not really one piece in isolation. So tonight we're going to cover the project background of the Phase 2 extension, talk about growing transit-oriented communities in Santa Clara, and then talk about the importance of stationary development, and then end with questions and discussions. So project background for those of you who aren't very familiar with the project is being delivered in 2 phases. The map on the top right corner of the slide depicts the existing BART system, which currently operates as far as south as Warm Springs and Fremont. The first phase, the Phase 1 extension, is a 10-mile extension that includes 2 stations at Milpitas and Berryessa, North San Jose. The first phase is nearing the end of construction. And the second phase, which is the focus of tonight's study session, is a 6-mile extension. 5 miles of that is tunnel, with 1 mile being at grade, which the portion within Santa Clara is at grade. It also includes an end-of-the-line maintenance facility at Newhall Yard, which we'll talk about. And passenger service is anticipated to begin in late 2026. The system will extend the 2 lines that currently serve Warm Springs, and there will be approximately 15-minute train frequencies. And the average weekday ridership for the entire Silicon Valley extension in 2035 is 66,000 riders a day. So zooming in on the BART Phase 2 extension, as I mentioned, there's 4 stations: Alum Rock 28th Street, that's within a subway, within the subway tunnel; Downtown San Jose Station, Diridon Station, and of course the Santa Clara Station. 2 innovative elements of the project include transit-oriented joint development, which is obviously the focus of tonight's discussion, as well as the use of a single board tunnel, which is the first of its kind in the US. So to accommodate the new service provided by the extension, the project will include the construction of the Newhall Maintenance Facility. This facility is approximately 40 acres and it will have light maintenance occurring on site. It will store up to 200 BART revenue vehicles as well as non-revenue maintenance vehicles. The Santa Clara station, as I mentioned, will be the end-of-the-line station, and it'll be located at the southern end, just to orient you, the southern end of the Brokaw Road. It's right across from the existing Caltrain tracks. And then you can see barely maybe on this graphic is that the station will be constructed at grade, and it will be accessible to the west via a pedestrian underground tunnel, which VTA built under the existing Caltrain tracks. In addition to the platform and system facilities, so the system facilities are in orange, there will be parking up to 500 parking spaces for shared use. And the site plan that you see was used for environmental clearance purposes, and we have a lot of access planning and engineering to do. So we will refine and update this site plan as we move forward, which includes the configuration of the station.
Excuse me. Could you go back and can you just point out the police station and so just so you can orient
Sure,
people to where
yeah.
this is?
So the
I
police
see it there.
The police station is just north
Is there
of.
a laser or is there? You have to point this way, Jill. Sorry.
I don't know that they're. Oh, cool. That's all. Okay, so here's the police station, the corner of El Camino and Benton Street. And here's Brokaw Road. This is really neat. Here's Brokaw. And then the orange is the BART platform, future BART platform. And then here's the existing Caltrain station.
Where's the Costco?
Costco is off up here. It's cool. All right, so this slide depicts our overall project schedule. We are closing out the environmental clearance phase. We just completed a significant milestone in the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, approving the NEPA document, actually June 5th, so very recently, which means that we can move forward and advance engineering, as well as in 2019 eventually apply for the remaining federal funds needed for the project. Major project construction is anticipated sometime mid-2020 with passenger revenue service at the end of 2026. So we'd like to take a few minutes to highlight the benefits of this project. It's a lot more than just bringing trains to Santa Clara. The BART project will reduce dependence on automobile vehicles by providing improved transit connectivity around the station. So this graphic shows that we anticipate nearly half of the riders will access BART by transferring from other transit services. So this is system-wide on the Phase 2 extension. Approximately 1/3 of the riders will walk or bike to access the station, and the remaining 20% of the riders will use automobiles to access BART, whether that's through taxi, Uber, Lyft, Kiss and Ride, or Park and Ride. This mode of access represents a significant shift in how we plan for and design transit facilities, which aligns really well with the Bay Area's plan to shift travel modes away from private automobile vehicles. Zooming into the Santa Clara station, this slide shows all of the intermodal connections at the station, both existing and future. And I think a key point to kind of keep in mind is this is one of the 2 stations in Santa Clara County that will have both BART and Caltrain. So there's a huge opportunity here. If you take a look at the BART graphic on the left, the size of the arrows represent the proportion of riders that will access the BART station through a particular mode. So you can see that the walk-in transit modes are the highest. If you can see that, they're weighted heavier. In addition to the connectivity that the project will bring, the project is expected to alleviate congestion by reducing vehicle miles traveled, resulting in lower CO2 emissions. In 2035, which is this graphic represents the 2035 numbers, it's expected to have approximately 52,000 riders, reduce the VMT by 27 million, and reduce CO2 vehicle emissions by over 22,000 metric tons. So what that's equivalent to is roughly 1 year of electricity for 4,300 homes. So it's significant. Additionally, the BART Phase 2 extension will catalyze development by making the county a more attractive place to live, work, and play, and help realize the visions that the communities have developed for the station areas. This project is already having a significant role in stimulating the economy through the recent planned, permitted, and constructed projects. So now we're going to talk about growing transit-oriented communities, specifically in Santa Clara. So before I launch in, I wanted to pause for a moment to define TOD. Ron's going to talk in more detail about TOD and kind of the ingredients that make good TOD, but I think it's worth kind of defining what we're talking about. So TOD is compact, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use, mixed-income development in proximity to high-quality multimodal transit, which Santa Clara has and will have with the BART project. As mentioned, the project includes transit-oriented joint development. The environmental document cleared TOJD. The land that we assemble for construction staging use will be used to construct high-density mixed-use development integrated with the stations. This joint development will help shape sustainable growth along the alignment, which leads to higher ridership and generate long-term revenue to support the operational costs of the system. This slide summarizes kind of what was cleared in the environmental document. For all 4 stations, the graphic on the left shows 1.65 million square feet of new office space, retail space, and 500 housing units. So specifically on the right, Santa Clara's BART station includes, and again, this is what was cleared in the environmental document, 500,000 square feet of office space, 30,000 square feet of retail space, and 220 housing units. To implement this joint development, just to note, VTA, of course, will continue to work with city staff through the entitlement process, and through coordination, VTA will work with private partners to update the scope of the development based on market factors, community input, and local land use goals. So why is VTA pursuing TOD for the BART Phase 2 program? Because really the key is ridership to support a successful system. And again, TOD allows VTA the opportunity to generate this long-term revenue needed to support the system. And then in addition, wanted to highlight that VTA is the congestion management agency, which has a goal and focus on reducing vehicular traffic and moving towards more sustainable transportation modes. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the TOD and access strategy study we've embarked upon with participation of city staff. So this is funded through an FTA pilot program. And really, as you see the 2 bubbles, land use, TOD strategy, and access planning, it's one effort, and it includes these 2 components. So we're developing strategies to increase investment in TOD, as well as we're developing implementable strategies to catalyze TOD. The access planning component is looking at multimodal access around the station, so both for the transit station and services, as well as the TOD, and it's the second bullet point, it's planned to design to meet the future needs of the development. We kicked off in January of 2018, and we're concluding in the spring of 2019, so it's roughly a 15-month effort. I should say that it includes the three stations, so it doesn't include all 4 stations. The Diridon station is being examined and planned through a separate effort, given high-speed rail and the other kind of complexities around the station. Wanted to highlight that City of Santa Clara staff and VTA, this partnership is essential. Staff is engaged in by every other month technical advisory group meetings as well as monthly coordination meetings. And I wanted to highlight too that a key element of a successful grant application for the Phase 2 project is really ridership, which this study is working to catalyze. So what will this study do? It's building on existing land use plans and policies, and we're focused on developing strategy for implementation, so how to get there. And we're developing feasible and implementable land use strategies and financing tools. And I also wanted to mention the stakeholder engagement. One of your commissioners has been involved in our community engagement efforts. So we are hosting TOD and access study workshops after some of the community working groups, which I'll talk about in a moment, and really would love to see broad participation from Santa Clara residents and yourselves. We will be conducting targeted stakeholder engagement to nearby development projects, property owners, the Santa Clara University, and others. Here's a picture. Oh, you're not in there, Commissioner Jane. Here's a picture from April where we were focusing on listening to the community about what really are the values and priorities they'd like to see in the station area. Actually, tomorrow is a CWG, and we're going to have a kind of a report out of what we heard in April. September, we're going to have a second workshop on TOD opportunities and constraints, followed by the next month of looking at strategies and guidelines. And then in April, we're going to wrap up with final report and next steps. So that's the community process, and would love for you all to engage with us. Before I hand it over to Ron, just wanted to say we'd love to come back and update you guys as we progress in this study. Thanks.
Thank you, Jill. I'm Ron Golem. I'm VTA's head of real estate and joint development. So what I'd like to talk about now is really, you've heard from Jill about the project and why we're pursuing, VTA is pursuing transit-oriented joint development, but also why we're trying to stimulate development on the properties around the station area to really maximize the benefits from the investment that's being made in the project. So let me talk about what are some of the key elements that make TOD. And before I start, I think the other thing I should note, just so everyone's there's no confusion on this point, is that right now we're at the level of trying to understand what is the potential and how do we maximize this opportunity. When we get to the point about talking about specific public-private partnerships on our property, and of course private properties outside the station area, all of these projects require local land use and permitting approvals. And so we're at the level right now of doing planning and doing strategy work. As this work progresses, you'll be seeing us more often coming back with either the developers we're working with or hopefully other property owners coming to you to seek to do these kinds of TOD projects. So at the core, what good TOD is all about is about integrating a combination of placemaking, mobility, and economic value. And it's really about creating the best possible user experience. And when we talk about user experience, what we're talking about are the people that live in the area, that work in the area, the people that are the core of the transit riders. And what we're ultimately trying to do is for the benefit of both transit riders and residents and businesses to create the best possible environment that really supports their activities. So just to talk about some of these themes briefly. The first one is placemaking. This is really about creating places that people want to be. That is an essential element of TOD. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to start with the existing context of what's already in the station areas and add to it and enhance it and build on it and make it better. We're trying to support diversity in the communities, diversity in all dimensions, whether we're talking about ages, groups, various interests that folks have. We're trying to create the kind of engaging and vibrant public realm that places that people want to come to, which is why we have this graphic from Mill Valley about what it looks like when a place is really convenes and attracts people to work and interact with each other. And we're also trying to promote a more compact and walkable urban environment. Really great TOD is about how do we arrange the pieces, how do we arrange the development so that people can easily walk or bike or take other modes between projects. You don't have to get in the car to go from your house to your office to the store to these other locations. We create great environments that you can move around in through a variety of modes. On economic development, you heard Jill talk about how transit is an economic catalyst. We really think that one of the opportunities that Good TOD presents is not just about creating access to these economic opportunities and not just about attracting companies. One of the reasons that we highlight the fact that the Santa Clara Station is one of 2 locations in the county that has both BART and Caltrain service, and even taking a step back, it's really one of 2 locations in the Bay Area where you have all the major Bay Area rail service, so not just BART and Caltrain, but you have ACE Train and you have the Capital Corridor. It's really a tremendous opportunity. And companies nowadays, in terms of location, are absolutely looking for these locations where they can be next to transit. I think, as you know, Caltrain locations up and down the system have been some of the prime opportunities in terms of job location attraction for a number of years here. And I think you're already starting to see that with what's happening around on the east side with the Coleman Highline project, and we think there's more opportunity there. The other opportunity is to provide a range of housing options. And so when we talk about housing options, it's not just product type, but it's also affordability. So for example, when VTA develops housing on its property, we have an affordable housing goal that 35% of our portfolio overall will be affordable units, and each project will have at least 20% affordable units. And by affordable, I mean affordable to households at 60% of area median income or lower. But there's also diversity in terms of housing choices, providing a range of housing choices for people that want different types of units, smaller units, larger units, various kinds of condos, townhouses, and so on. And we also think that part of the economic value calculation is how TOD can support the existing neighborhoods. It's very much, as I'm talking about, a vision about how we can create TOD and enhance the community of surrounding neighborhoods. On the user experience, this is about creating opportunities for people to get out and interact more with each other and interact with the environment and really understand the place and appreciate place. So it's about how do we create settings that we can showcase the culture and the identity of the local communities, how we can create a diversity of a mix of uses and engaging activities, so there's a lot of reasons for people to want to come in this area and spend time there. And how do we help people get around and go between the area? And I think I'll talk in a minute, but I think we all know that one of the challenges we face starting in the Santa Clara Station area is just with the existing configuration of tracks and so on, wayfinding is really a challenge. Finally, the mobility element is really about how do we make transit as a gateway to the city? How do we provide access to multiple modes of transportation and encourage folks to get around between their houses, their workplaces, their shopping, their activities in ways that aren't necessarily reliant on the automobile? And how do we provide an ease of connectivity for everyone through the TOD to be able to take those trips? And then finally, it's really about ensuring that the parking is right-sized, that we provide the parking that is needed, but we don't provide an excessive amount of parking. The access to opportunity, we like to show this graph because this really highlights in a lot of the Bay Area about how we're already going down this path of really trying to leverage transit locations near transit. This shows density, so you can sort of see with the existing transit services and the stops how that maps out against where location of jobs are. And we think that the BART extension phase 2 in the Santa Clara Station presents opportunities to extend that. On transportation options, this is a nice graphic that shows some of the points I'm talking about how we provide access to multiple transportation options. We want to enhance biking, walking, public transit, shared mobilities. And so this is not just a vision of how you build BART, but it's also about how you work on the streets around the station so that they support all these activities, that you feel safe and encouraged to walk between places, ride your bike, take advantage of these other modes. And just to talk about parking a bit more, the right sizing of parking is really one of the challenges here. So as you know, in our plan, we will be providing a significant amount of parking at the station to accommodate the future riders at the Santa Clara Station who will drive. But when we look at the TOD piece, we really want to ensure that we don't overbuild the parking. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. As you know, and I'm sure you hear this discussion, when you invest too much in parking, you end up decreasing the amount that you can invest in transit-oriented development. And when we talk to developers, the concern that everyone has right now is they know the world is changing. Between autonomous vehicle, car sharing, and so on, we know that the way that people use cars, the amount of parking that's needed is going to be very different 10 years from now. What we don't know is when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And so every developer I talk to is really afraid about over-investing in parking. And in terms of some of the economic benefits, we really do face a choice about being careful that we don't overinvest in parking so that we lose the opportunity to create benefits in other areas. And so some of the key tools there that I think are part of this discussion, and these are some of the items that the TOD strategy study that Jill was talking about will address, is what are the appropriate requirements? Some cities now are going to the extent of abolishing minimum parking requirements and really letting the market decide what's needed and thinking about how you can unbundle it. One of the other key ideas is to think about, it's not about parking in each building in a station area, but it's about a district approach. To maximize sharing between parking, how do you treat parking as a shared resource so that you can really manage it in the most efficient way between all the different uses, both residential and commercial, and so on. And then there's a lot you can do to think about how you tailor requirements and really kind of get smarter about how parking is done so that you do really right-size that solution. So let me talk just briefly about the station area development. As you know, there is already a great activity in the station area that's going on, both with Coleman High Line, and then there's the Gateway project that I know is currently going through the review process with the city. As you know, VTA and the city of Santa Clara are currently involved in an exclusive negotiations agreement with the developer for the Santa Clara Caltrain station parking lot. The city owns most of that lot, VTA owns a smaller part, but we're both teamed to identify what is the opportunity to create a TOD project there that both creates student housing opportunities to benefit both the university and the surrounding community, but also brings other uses in as well so it can be a great TOD project. And then, of course, one of the other key projects that's across the street is 575 Benton Street. So all of these projects are kind of initial pieces about trying to create sort of a transit-oriented development stationary and really maximizing the benefit of the new service. And it goes without saying that as we get further away, there's a lot of activity that's around El Camino Real and the surrounding areas as well. So we think that this timing of this project is well planned relative to the market. So let me just conclude with a couple of graphics to show you, I think, what our vision is about how the pieces start coming together. One of the key ideas, as you heard us talk, is about how do we concentrate development and growth around the station areas to maximize the economic benefit, maximize ridership, encourage active transportation, and focus development on those areas while preserving the surrounding neighborhoods. And so what this graphic shows is the sites that we're talking about that really represent those opportunities. So you see 575 Benton Street, you see the Caltrain parking lot, but you also see across the tracks the sites that we've identified for the future BART station, as well as the Coleman Gateway project. And you'll even see that we identified to the right the property that's just south of the Caltrain station, not because there are any plans there, but part of this goal of creating TOD is this is a long-term vision. And so if we are successful in creating the setting that promotes TOD, I can assure you that at some point down the road, now granted it may be 15 or 20 years, but at some point the property further to the south that we've highlighted, and actually to be clear what I'm talking about since you give me this great tool, is this property here, that owner of that property will say, gee, that was a great project when it was built in terms of the context that existed then, but in the future when we have the Santa Clara BART station activity there, that also represents a prime opportunity to create TOD at the appropriate time. And of course, our vision is not just about buildings, but it's about how we connect all these places. So it's really about the access improvements. How do we help people get around between the places? And so this is kind of where we wanted to end, because obviously we have a lot of challenges now with the tracks that separate kind of the two sides of the station area. And even with the new tunnel, how do we get people to understand that that's there and what a great resource that is to get around? And so a lot of our work is focused around how can we enhance the connections, how can we enhance the wayfinding, how can we maximize the opportunities in terms of walkable development, and doing all that to reduce the demand for parking. And so this really shows the walking opportunities, and then I think here, this shows some of the transit opportunities. So this really illustrates how it's about trying to create those connections. So with that, we'll stop. I know we've thrown out a lot of ideas, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or provide additional information.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I have a couple quick questions.
Sure.
So what is going to be the transit time between Santa Clara to San Francisco?
Well, from Santa Clara to San Francisco, that's really Caltrain. So the key thing about...
well, I mean, if I were to take BART from Santa Clara to San Francisco.
The time, I'm sorry. Yes, about an hour.
An hour. And what are the things that you need to overcome to make this phase 2 happen? Federal funding is one of them.
That's a great question. So there are several parts. So for the BART phase 2 project itself, at this point we have the approved environmental document. We have most of the funding strategy, especially with the RM3 measure that had additional funding for it. The one remaining piece is the federal funding piece. And so we are engaged with the Federal Transit Administrations on discussions about our application. And as you may see in the news, we're pursuing a pilot project they have for an expedited project delivery. We're working towards the goal of making the formal application for federal funding by late next year so we can get the money. So that's one track. Now, the TOD strategy study that Jill was talking about and the study about access improvements, that's going on concurrently. That'll be going on through early next year. And what we hope that does is really outlines a set of strategies and tools and techniques that we can then hand to the city of Santa Clara and the city of San Jose, and they can then start the process saying, well, based on this information, the opportunity, how do we take advantage of this and really think about how we implement the things that fall within the city in terms of access improvements, land use designations, and that sort of thing. Obviously, there's the construction, and I think for construction, 2020-ish. As we go further and get into construction, you know, for the most part, a lot of the development that we're doing on our property will happen later in the construction cycle and closer to the start of revenue service. So the main thing I'm trying to say is there's a whole series of dates that'll continue up until the start of revenue service in terms of how the pieces of the project come together.
And you mentioned the transit-oriented joint development.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the participants in the joint development, and what are the land use and finance tools that you mentioned?
Sure. So when we talk about the projects that VTA does directly, we have land that we own today, and we have land that we're acquiring for the project. So for example, when we acquire land for construction staging areas, we use that for construction, but once the work is done, that becomes a development site. And so our process is that we pursue public-private partnerships with developers. And so like most agencies, we go through an RFP process, we identify our requirements in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. We're offering these sites on long-term ground leases, and so we go through a process to select a developer, negotiate a deal. As I was saying before, when we do these projects, we need local approvals, and so once we know what the project is, then we would be coming to the city in terms of getting the land use approvals and the permits.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Kelly.
Okay, yep. Okay, good, it's on. Quick question on some of the projects that are currently being planned right now. What kind of height limits are some of the other cities around the Bay Area looking at for their transit centers? And if you could touch on the centers that have already put housing close to transit, has it positively impacted traffic flow in those areas?
A couple thoughts. When we talk about the height limits part of your question, obviously when we talk about the Bay Area as a whole, there's a lot of variety in there. But I will say is outside Santa Clara County, you know, we work closely with BART staff that does similar work to what we're doing in terms of trying to create this joint development and create this TOD. And I will say, I think it's fair to say that in those discussions with BART staff, they've been having a lot of positive experiences with local cities in terms of what BART has been saying to cities is we want you to upzone and allow more density right at the BART stations because this creates the opportunity for TOD. And in fact, BART has been saying, you know, we're going to focus our efforts on the projects we pursue to the cities that are interested in doing this and sort of set the stage for that to happen. And I think that obviously there's going to be places where there are concerns about heights, but in general, BART is experiencing a lot of support and success in this goal of allowing denser TOD type development. I think certainly when we look at what's happening in Santa Clara County in the 4 stations, as you know, VTA supported the stationary planning exercise that was done around 2010. That was not formally adopted as a stationary plan, but elements that were adopted into Santa Clara's general plan. And I think from our perspective, there's a lot of good work that's already there about how heights at the Santa Clara station can support TOD. And I think that when you look at the other stations in the city of San Jose, the city is supporting that. Now, with respect to your question about kind of traffic and sort of activity, I'll say this, is that the data we have in the Bay Area for TOD is that when you look at the projects that have been built in the stations, about half the people that live in TOD within a half mile of it are frequent users of transit. And so there is a tremendous number of trips that are not automobile trips, that are trips where people are walking or biking, they're getting on transit, they're making those trips. I make that comparison because when you look outside the half mile from transit stations, you have something like 4% of trips for people that are in those areas are being done by transit. And so it really illustrates, I think, very nicely how when people are around a transit station, when they're in these TOD environments, they take transit a lot. When they're further away, they don't, just because of distance from the transit. It's a little bit harder to turn that into a parking or a congestion discussion about parking because, what's happening with parking, we all know, is that separate from what TOD is doing, we also have just this overall regional growth. And just relative to where some of the job creation is going and some of the housing is going, there's a lot of things that are happening in traffic that really aren't about TOD. I think the best thing I can say about TOD and what's been happening in projects is that if those projects hadn't happened, the traffic would be much worse than what we're seeing right now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jane?
Yeah, so as you know, am the Old Quad representative for the community working group, and I'm pleased that VTA and BART are doing such great outreach to the communities. I wish that there were more attendees, but in any case, one of the things I wanted to comment on was that the Business Journal just had on the 11th of June an article called Crane Watch, and they talked about the top 10 developments that are in construction right now. And the two biggest ones are on Alder in Milpitas, that's at the Berryessa BART station.
Okay.
And so the impression I got from this was that these BART stations are attracting a lot of development, a lot of interest. And so my question is, given that, and given that the state has kind of taken away control from us about what we can do around these transit things, what do you see for what's going on in Santa Clara, and what can we expect in Santa Clara for, you know, projects that are, you know, I don't know, 15 stories or 20 stories. And then I had a couple of more questions. One of the big problems is that we have a massive amount of development going up on our north side. We have Tasman East, we have the City Place, we have this Genzon Kylie project. How are people going to get to the BART station? Does VTA have plans for that? And then finally, when you design the station, presumably some of the businesses will want to run buses there. Will there be provisions for Google buses?
Let me ask you, going back to the first part of your question, you made a reference to the state taking away some of the local control, and I wasn't sure what you were referring to.
So there were, I think it was 15 bills that were passed
the affordable
last
housing
year.
legislation.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And the density that we've lost control of a lot of our yeah.
I think if this is responsive to your question, you are correct. I haven't had a chance to read the article in the Business Journal that you're citing, but in terms of the interest at the Berryessa BART station and the other BART stations, it is there. I mean, when we talk to Google, you know, there's a lot of modes of transportation at the Diridon station, and Google has been really clear that the one thing that makes them want to be there is BART. It's not any of the other services. And so I think you're already seeing that in terms of the interest we have. Again, I think that I look at what's happening with the Coleman Highline project, and I realize that the office part's outside the city of Santa Clara, but I think that that interest there speaks to what I was talking about earlier about the popularity of Caltrain service, and I think BART coming will accelerate that, and we'll see interest. I was just talking to a developer earlier today about the downtown BART station, and they've got a 1 million square foot office tenant that's now interested in that location based on BART coming. So it is coming, and it will be there, and employers are very much looking at these locations by transit, and the reason looking for it is because their employees don't want to be driving. Their employees want to be taking transit. They know it's a competitive advantage to be at these locations. So I think we are going to see that activity. It is coming. I'm sorry, you're going to have to help me with the other question.
Going to the north side?
Going to the north side. So, you know, it's a great question. Not being the transportation planner, I'm not going to give you a detailed answer. Maybe I'll let Jill speak. But I will say that, you know, in general, when you look at what we did with BART Phase 1 is that we saw that with the Milpitas and Berryessa North San Jose stations opening, we had to reconfigure our current transit service to really take advantage of the connection to BART service. And so I fully expect that we'll be going through a similar process to think about how do we take the new BART service to Santa Clara and leverage the existing service. And I know you asked me about shuttles. The Phase 1 stations are open. Those have bays for the commuter shuttles, for the transportation network companies. We really are trying to maximize all the folks having access to those locations. Okay.
Okay, are you done? Oh, Commissioner Shah.
Okay. So Santa Clara Station is unique in a way, like we also have an ACE service over there. Are you collaborating with ACE for this project, like in any way? Because ACE, I heard, is right now running full, and they might enhance the service, or what? Do you have any status on that?
So I should say that VTA is part of the ACE entity, and we are also part of the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority. So, VTA, in addition to being the transit agency, we're the congestion management agency. And so as part of that, we are actually participants in all the regional rail. And so yes, it is part of our thinking about how do we maximize the opportunity at the Santa Clara Station for all the modes of transit, not just BART, not just Caltrain, but also ACE and Capital Corridor. I think that you are correct that these services are seeing increased popularity. People want to have other choices than driving to their jobs. But I think that in terms of some of the specifics, I would have to get other folks to give you a more detailed answer about kind of where that planning discussion is going on with ACE.
Okay. My one other question is the last mile travel. Some of the cities have started like engaging with third-party contracts like Uber and other stuff, and which reduces a lot of your overheads, basically. Is VTA thinking of, because that's one thing which the commuters are really missing, last mile travel. They cannot get to the station and they cannot get from the station. And is VTA thinking of something on those fronts, like talking to Uber type of service or whatever third-party services, which can be handy?
It's a great question, and you're right. The first mile, last mile is always one of the big challenges. I think that we are going to be looking at all the options. We don't currently have a program like some transit agencies do, especially out of state. I think you're familiar with some agencies that are actually subsidizing and supporting some of the revenues. I don't think those ideas are off the table. We just haven't gotten there yet. And so I think that right now what we're mostly doing is trying to make sure that we have places where those companies can make connections at our stations. But I think as we go forward, we'll be having more discussions about that.
And that brings to the same question, like, ACE has a shuttle service which goes around.
Right.
Is VTA thinking of providing those type of shuttle services for where they have a business hub so that they can connect to Santa Clara Station or Diridon Station or something like that?
Right. The ACE shuttle is actually operated by VTA. That is a VTA
okay.
program. And so, again, we're early enough, I can't give you a specific answer, but I will tell you that in terms of our planning for transit connections and how we get people to make connections, we're going to cast the broadest possible net, because really what our goal is, and again, this is to justify the investment in BART to bring it to the region, is how do we get the largest number of riders? And the way you get the largest number of riders is to give people the largest possible range of opportunities about how they get from the station to their destination.
Okay. And one thing I popped up on my head is city place development, Tasman East development, and there's right now only connection between those two places is ACE, and which is only during the peak hours, morning and evening service. So are you thinking of providing something during the day? Can you use that track with the agreement they have, or
so
are
the
there any
alignment
plans?
that goes on Lafayette between the Tasman project, that alignment is for Capital Corridor and for ACE, but that's not the Caltrain alignment. And so I think that the reality is, just given the geography, it's not going to be viable to try to bring Caltrain and other service onto that alignment. But I think, getting back to your earlier question, I think that as part of the planning, and I would imagine this is the discussion the city's having with the developer, and I know VTA has been part of that discussion as well, is what are the various ways that we can enhance that connection?
And one other question, which is, you showed us various size of lots on the north side and south side. I know. So what is the arrangement for VTA? Does VTA owns those lots on the north side of Santa Clara Station, or in planning stages of acquiring those?
Right. So what we showed in the environmental document for BART Phase 2 is that the property that's on the north side of Brokaw, just east of the tracks, that is a property that we're going to acquire for the station and for the parking, and that will also be a location for transit-oriented joint development. So that is not property we own today. That's property that we will be buying as part of the transportation project.
So when you say buying, are you in talks with that? What happens, let's say the existing developer say, hey, no, I'm not ready to sell it off, or something like that?
Right. So the way it works, I mean, again, we just recently received the record decision the other week, and so we're still at the beginning stage. As we go forward, and this will really, we will be reaching out to some of the property owners of properties we need in the relatively near future, because there's a whole process to engage property owners who may be affected and talk to them about the impacts and how we meet the obligations we have to mitigate impacts to tenants and property owners and so on. So that work will be starting soon, but the actual purchase is probably still into 2019. As a transportation project, ultimately, when we do get to the point of writing offers, we do try to buy properties from people on a voluntary basis. If we're not able to do that, and if we need the property to enable the project to proceed, we are able to pursue eminent domain in those cases.
Oh, you can? Have
Yes.
you done that in the Bay Area anywhere?
So I would say for BART Phase 1, to talk about that project, which is bringing BART from Warm Springs into Santa Clara County, we did several things. So we bought on a voluntary basis right-of-way from Union Pacific Railroad, but we also had to buy other right-of-way and access from private property owners. I would say that probably about 5 to 10% of that property acquisition was through eminent domain. Most of it was on a voluntary basis because we really try to do that. Sometimes folks just want to take it to the last minute because they feel they can get a better deal that way. And sometimes that's how it plays out.
My last question. I know we had 2016, we had a measure to fund part of the BART phases. And you did mention that federal grant, and I'm going on Chair Ike's question on that. How confident are we to have adequate funding from our resources as well as the federal resources? Like federal is so much going on and other stuff. So how confident feasibility-wise we are on putting this in place?
So of course, there are a couple of measures the voters in Santa Clara County have passed to support the BART extension, and so we have those monies now. We recently received a major award from the state of California for the state funding that we're counting on. The RM3 measure that was passed contained a considerable amount of money for BART Phase 2. So all of those sources, the local and the state monies, we either have in hand or we know are going to be there. Really, the remaining question is the federal piece. Now, one of the reasons, you heard me mention about expedited project delivery, one of the reasons we're looking at this pilot, and I'll try not to get too far into the details with it, but it is a pilot where the administration is really trying to promote public-private partnerships approaches to doing projects. And we feel that if we can pursue that project, that creates an opportunity for us to align what we're trying to do with the goals of the administration and really puts us in a better position to advance the project. We also know that because in that program, they allow no more than 25% of the funding to be from the federal sources. We're probably the only major transportation project in the US that really has a realistic shot of meeting that threshold. And so, again, it's a pilot. We're still having discussions with FTA. They're trying to figure out how it's going to work. We're talking to them about how it's going to work. This is the work that's going on right now, leading up to the application next year. So obviously, I can't say it's guaranteed because we haven't submitted the application, but we are hopeful that by appealing to that program, lining ourselves with the administration's goal, we will have a good shot at that federal money.
Thank you very much.
And what year do you expect to find out if you're going to be actually able to break ground?
So the application will be in 2019, and the goal with that, and this is part of the expedited project delivery, is to have the full funding grant agreement, which is how the federal monies are provided, by 2020.
Else? Oh, your light is not on. Okay, Commissioner Salem.
So I really only have one question, but in 10 parts.
You'll have to help me then, both
Yeah,
number 10.
I know, this will be bad. Let's actually hit them one at a time. So are you providing secure bicycle parking, and what's the overall percentage of space allocated to that? Do you have any idea, roughly?
Pardon? Yeah, I think it's to be done. What I will say that, again, the best example, and I realize people haven't had a chance to see them because they're not open yet, but when you look at the Phase 1 BART stations at Milpitas and Berryessa, North San Jose, we have very sizable bike facilities there that is secure bike parking to absolutely encourage bike usage to the stations.
About EV charging percentage?
We do have that. As part of the Phase 1 projects, we built both parking structures at Berryessa and at Milpitas. And in those garages, each of them has about 24 electric charging stations. I don't think I've ever seen a parking structure that has more electric charging stations than what we've been building at the BART stations.
So your presentation hinted that you expect that the 500 spot parking would evolve less. It would become less of an issue over time with other mass transit ways to reach and leave the transportation hub. Have you explored how you're going to evolve that structure into other use? Or alternately, let's say that you miscalculated and suddenly there's a higher demand for parking and people are starting to overflow into the neighborhoods and other surrounding businesses. Are you keeping in mind the possibility of actually increasing?
So
parking?
the parking at the station was sized based during the planning process, the environmental process. It was based on a transportation model in terms of what we think the demand is, and it was a relatively conservative approach so that we could meet what that parking is. I do think that as we build parking, that the parking structures will remain. What we've done at the other stations is that we actually have a parking structure, but we have surface parking. And so the surface parking provides a lot of capacity, and the surface parking provides the flexibility that if it's not needed in the future, it's obviously much easier to replace surface parking than to take down a parking structure. I think you were also asking about design of parking structures, and it's a great question because people are really thinking about it. And there's sort of two arguments, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure which one is correct in the sense of there's ways you can design parking structures to be reusable, but you have to have higher floor-to-floor heights, you have to have flat floors. It becomes a lot more expensive to design it. And so at the end of the day, you ask yourself, does that extra cost up front save us money down the road, as opposed to when a parking structure is obsolete and not needed, you grind it up and it becomes the base building material for what you're doing next. A lot of my comments were not so much about the transit parking, but really about the parking at the development, because what we're seeing and what developers are seeing is that there's not just as much demand for parking as models do. I'll give you an example. There's an organization called Transform, and they have a great database of about 80 TOD projects in the Bay Area, and this includes projects in Santa Clara County. And if you look at their analysis, what they've highlighted is that a lot of these TOD projects that were built with parking to match local zoning code requirements, a lot of those projects have a lot of underutilized parking. And so at least our experience so far has been that when we build parking to requirements in TOD projects, we end up with a lot of excess parking.
Okay, so the last couple of things is, what green solutions have you been thinking about up front? Are you going to provide solar photovoltaic on the roof of the parking and other surfaces? Are you going to try and bring that in immediately?
We have done that for the first phase of the BART stations, and I think we'll be looking at that. And we are very much focused on sustainability and really how we minimize the impact in terms of the stations, and whether it's solar and other kinds of strategies. We're very much focused on that.
Okay, so two little ones. Is your pedestrian access going to be tunnel based or over the top elevated walkways? Have you thought that out?
That's gotten a lot of focus, and I think folks who know a lot of the history of the discussion, I think in the past there have been discussions about overhead walkways. What's ended up happening is that just by virtue of the geometry and the sight lines and the heights that you need, it's really incredibly expensive and difficult to build a structure. Essentially, you have safety issues unless you get really big and tall and far, and by the time you do that, you're doing something very expensive. And so the installation of the tunnel project that is there today was a way of really addressing the circulation between the two sides. And so when you look at the plans, of course, the tunnel provides direct access to the Caltrain platform, and what we envision is the tunnel will have a connection coming off of it, so from the tunnel, you will have direct access into the future BART station.
Yeah, I think then the last thing was, maybe Commissioner Jane covered it, but are you going to provide some kind of dedicated access for fast shuttles for off-site parking or for other companies?
Yes.
Space that you're going to set aside that they can use?
Again, we haven't done the design work yet, but going back to the phase 1 stations, each of those stations at Milpitas and Berryessa, North San Jose has a transit center. And so what's in that transit center are bus bays that are dedicated for VTA transit, bus bays that are dedicated for commuter shuttles, locations that are dedicated for transportation network companies to do the drop-off and pick-off, kiss and ride. Again, we're trying to accommodate all those uses.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I think we have a couple of people and the members of the public who wanted to ask questions. Oh, yes. Yes, Commissioner Becker.
So my one question is, this development going right by Brokaw and Coleman, is there any proposal or any idea that they're going to expand that area or look into it? Because I work right across the street from this, so that area is like congestion based, especially with Costco. So I'm wondering if we're going to put a BART station there too, if that whole area is going to become a giant traffic circle, or is there plans in the future for fixing that problem too, to alleviate traffic?
Yeah, I think, again, the area that we identified, and this was the graphic that Jill showed earlier, that was the environmental document, so that is the limits of the property that we're requiring for construction staging and the station and parking at TOJD. Our footprint won't expand beyond that. The environmental document did address, the various traffic impacts that are out there, and as any environmental document identifies a series of mitigations. But I do, as we go forward with the project, as we refine our design, this is something that we'll be working with the city on an ongoing basis to really think about, based on the actual designs that's developed, how do we most effectively incorporate those mitigations and address a lot of the challenges that you're talking about. And I think that, there will also be other things that we'll be looking at, but I think there's other opportunities with other development happening in the area about how to use that circulation network to also help kind of open up the area.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Sean McFeely? Do you have a question? Oh, please come up and ask your question. Or comments,
Hi,
questions.
so just a comment. I represent Catalyze Silicon Valley. I'm here. I'm the co-chair of their advocacy committee. We just wanted to say, announce our support for this project and address how these developments are going to make the Santa Clara station be the third most transit connected station in the whole Bay Area, the most number of connections. And this is the greatest opportunity, one of the greatest opportunities for us to concentrate housing and commercial development to reduce traffic and car trips. And especially in that sense, we should definitely watch how much parking we put there, and in order to encourage the transit usage, and then also encourage the development of housing in the area, especially since housing is so critical right now and housing prices are really astronomical in our region. So thank you.
Thank you. Mark Roast?
Thank you. It's Roost like Shirikanu. And I was in the charrette that the city of San Jose and the AARP conducted a few weeks ago in San Jose. And I was asked to do a structural design for development in the airspace, and did so. And then they took that and made it a little more interesting architecturally. But something that's up to 150 to 200 feet tall and up to a couple hundred feet wide, or depending on the right of way, with over the BART stations, over other places where you could connect to transit, is a really good opportunity for lots and lots of housing, as well as, and very low cost if you're using the structural and the materials that I was contemplating. Also, it can be used to reduce, if we have elevated group rapid transit as a feeder for BART and as a community connector, it can be used to reduce the traffic that was just mentioned that's already present, say, on those two streets, as well as offloading, as well as being a connector into BART and a feeder and a taker and a receiver for BART. And that has been very heavily engineered back in 1990, 2000. They were seeing that it was a fifth of the cost of elevated light rail. And the materials and structures that I work with would make it substantially less expensive than that. And there's a bunch of other relationships that I could talk about maybe offline.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're out of time, and oh, yes, one more 2 minutes.
My name is James Viso. I work for Kidder Matthews, commercial real estate firm. I don't know if everyone's aware or not, but back in 2006, Santa Clara Station Area Plan drew up plans to have the VTA BART station right on a 155,000 square foot warehouse building on 5 to 10 acre site. That FedEx has disappeared. They're no longer in that building. Apple has done a 10, 15-year lease in place and just dropped about $10 to $20 million. So if that is the location where the BART is going to be located, I don't understand how you guys are going to buy Apple out of a lease to relocate. So I think you guys got your hands full. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, time is up. I'm sorry, we have to start our 7 o'clock meeting. Okay, so thank you very much for coming. And how can people stay informed of your progress? Can you give us your quick email, please?
Sure. So you can go to the website, VTA, and we've got a project website for the BART Phase 2 project and a TOD and access page from the BART Phase 2 site.
And can we have a copy of your presentation?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Okay, all right, so we're ready to move on to the next project. Huh? No, we haven't started yet. Are you joining us for this meeting? Oh. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. I'm calling the Planning Commission meeting of June 13th, 2018. Can everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, please remain standing for the statement of values.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and the will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interests of our people, our neighbors. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, roll call. Would you like to do the roll call? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Becker. Here. Commissioner Casey.
Present.
Commissioner Chahal.
Here.
Commissioner Jane.
Here.
Commissioner Salam.
Here.
Okay. And Commissioner Kelly. Here.
Okay. Okay. Before we call the regular meeting, we have an announcement from Commissioner O'Halloran.
Thank you. I'm going to be resigning the commission. I'm going to be moving out of town, and so I don't think it's appropriate for me to look forward. I'll certainly watch what happens in Santa Clara, but I don't think it would be appropriate for me to reside on the board or on the commission while it is. So I just wish everybody the best of luck. I appreciate all the experiences and all the friendships I've had here and education on the BART. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Commissioner O'Halloran, and thank you very much for your service. Okay. What? All right. Declaration of procedures. Public hearings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the commission directs all activity during the hearings. All comments shall be addressed to the commission. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent hearing. Applicants will be allotted up to 10 minutes to present and justify proposals, following staff presentation of the item. Other speakers will be given up to 4 minutes. The applicant is then allotted up to 5 minutes for rebuttal of comments. No additional comments will be accepted upon the close of public hearing, although the commission reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. Special procedures and time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. And appeal of commission actions must be filed in writing within 7 calendar days. Okay, do we have any continuances or exceptions today from today's agenda? Okay, being none, let's move on to consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull any item from the consent calendar?
I'll pull item 1A.
Okay, anything else? All right, any motion to vote on the other remaining items on the consent calendar?
I move to accept the balance of the consent calendar.
Second.
Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, try that.
Oh, we're gonna try this, all right. I need to log in.
Hit me.
Okay, I'm still connecting. Okay, so
Nope.
can we, while we're waiting to join, I'm still waiting to join, would Commissioner Chaha like to describe?
Yes, sure. So I saw the minutes, and in the past, we had some details in the minute about the deliberations. And this time, I didn't see any deliberation. There were only mention of the agenda item and then the motion, and that's it. Are we deleting the deliberations on purpose, or earlier we used to have a summary of the deliberations? I didn't see those. Thank you.
My understanding that in being consistent with the city council, in their minutes, we are taking action items, so actions, motions, and recording those, but not, to be consistent with the city council minutes, doing active deliberation.
So if a resident want to find out the deliberation, is the video is the only part of it, or they can have access to something in writing?
We have both the audio and the video recordings, and is supposed to be our supplement to the action minutes.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Still can't connect. I don't know what to do. Who else? Everyone else is connected? Me?
You're on the right network.
Yeah, I did. And it just stays in connecting group. Wi-Fi? Nothing happens. Yeah, I'm online because I can get into others. Excellent. All right. Okay. Let's take a vote. No speakers. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for waiting. Apologize for the delay. So do we have a motion that we can vote on? Yeah, but I don't see it on appearing on my. Have the motion in the system for us to vote?
Yep.
No? All right, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carries. Let's move on to next item. Oh, yeah, okay. So, all right, any motion on item 1A?
I make a motion to approve item 1A after the clarifications.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, motion carries. All right, public hearing, item 2, which is 18-575. Would you like to announce it, or? Okay. A public hearing on action on the use permit at 2499 Homestead Road.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rebecca Bustos with the Planning Division. The item before you is a use permit to allow the permanent residency of a private school located on an existing church site at 2499 Homestead Road. So it's the wrong location. Please ignore the aerial map, that's the wrong location, but this is located on the corner, the northeast corner of San Tomas Expressway and Homestead Road. The project history, so previously in 2011, there was a 2-year temporary use permit and a mitigated negative declaration approved for a K through 8 school by the Planning Commission. Following the 2-year temporary use, in 2013, the Planning Commission did approve a permanent K through 12 school on the site. However, that approval was appealed to the Planning Commission, and subsequently, the City Council did uphold the approval, but they added conditions, which did include another 4-year time limit. Last year, the Planning Commission approved an additional 1-year extension to the 4-year approval while the subject application was reviewed. So this is the project site and a site plan. The proposal maintains all of the previous improvements to the site, including 17 modular buildings for the classrooms, offices, and restroom facilities. An existing gate and bollards prohibit cut-through traffic to and from Karen Drive during the school week. The school's enrollment does not exceed 195 students on any day, as all students are on a part-time basis and have either a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday schedule, so there's no full-time students. There are also 55 faculty and staff members. As the project was previously proposed as a temporary use, the Public Works Department and Silicon Valley Power chose to defer public improvements through 2 covenants running with the land that were recorded in December 2011. So public improvements on the site, including ADA upgrades, electrical conduits, and driveways, were to be implemented should the use become permanent or until so required by the city. The Public Works and Silicon Valley Power are choosing to require those improvements at this time with this application. As requested by staff, the applicant also proposes to widen and improve the existing legal nonconforming front landscape area, and it will be widened to 10 feet. All the other setbacks, parking, and structures would remain unchanged from the prior applications. The site is designated medium density residential by the general plan. However, general plan policy 5.3.1-P21 does allow public quasi-uses, including schools, to be located at any location in the city, provided that access is from an arterial or larger roadway, and Homestead does provide the access required by that policy. As I stated earlier, a mitigated negative declaration was approved for the project with the original approval in 2011. There were mitigation measures identified which were incorporated into the project and therefore reduced all of the impacts to a less than significant level. As the applicant is not modifying the approval and the school capacity is actually less than what was studied at that time, it is within the envelope of what was previously studied. So it was determined that no additional impacts would result from the project with the ongoing implementation and the prior implementation of the previously identified mitigation measures. So staff's recommendation is for the Planning Commission to approve the use permit to allow a K through 12 grade school to operate on the existing church site indefinitely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions from the, so I guess we're using this now. Speakers. Commissioner Becker, are you using this or are you?
I don't even know if I'm connected on this.
Okay, all right, Commissioner Becker, please.
So I'm wondering, do I have to abstain from this if I live across the street from there?
Does he?
Yeah, I live on the
Oh,
La Palma Apartments right across the
what I
street from
mean
the
is,
school.
does he have to abstain?
So do I have to abstain from this?
500 feet.
Yes? Oh, okay, all right.
So I'll abstain.
Maybe you need to, yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? No questions. All right, would the members of the public like to speak on this?
The applicant here?
Oh, the applicant like to speak on this matter? Okay, yes, Mr. Crusoe.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Planning Commissioners. We're very excited about the project. It has been 5 years in the making to come to you now for the permanent CUP. To my knowledge, there have been no complaints from neighbors in the last several years since we have been operational. There were many previously under the prior use of Cardin Academy, which was a much more intensified use and larger scale, as staff had mentioned. We are in agreement with most of the staff recommendations, with the exception of a couple of clarifications. One, I believe that the electrical memo may have been updated. Yes, thank you. We just had a conversation with Lenny Bautista yesterday regarding some of the conditions that were not applicable to our project, and those were, I believe, removed and updated to planning commissioners. The other areas are two more. One, under the electrical conditions of approval, item E11 and E15. Under E11, it says existing non-ADA compliant frontage shall be replaced with current city standard frontage improvements. It was discussed and agreed with planning that we would not be required to replace the entire sidewalk along the front of the property. So if that can be clarified, that was discussed. City Council at one time intervened and stated to staff that indeed we're not required to do that. That was not one of the original conditions of the CUP when it went through council for approval, or for temporary approval and then for permanent. The way City Council had stated is that all the conditions that were agreed upon and the covenants that were recorded that staff had mentioned, those would go forward and become permanent, but that there would be no additional conditions to the project, and that was clarified. So E11, if it is referring to sidewalks, it needs to be removed, and E15, it talks about additional bike racks, etc. Most of the children are brought in by vehicle and they carpool in. In fact, that's why there's little impact to the site. So E11 and E15 to be removed. And the last item was item C as in Charlie 5 under community development. It says construct a 6-foot masonry wall along property lines abutting residential properties. If we go back to the site plan, if that can be brought back up onto the screen, please. There we go, thank you. In looking at the site, there's probably $250,000 worth of fence on this property. If that were to be a condition, it was not an original condition by City Council, and there had never been any complaints. If you look at the building locations at the top of the screen, all of those classrooms, children are not allowed along the back edge where that fence is. The playground area, as you see, is in the center of the site and more towards the Homestead Road, and in the center between the buildings, that's the play yard, and it is not along the back edge. There really is no impact to those neighbors, and to put that onerous burden, we are a nonprofit school. This is not, my own children go there, so I'm not only the architect, but also a dad. And we don't have $250,000 for the desire of this masonry fence. I understand it may be policy, but it's not what was agreed to in the covenants, restrictions, and conditions with the City Council when we were going forward with the project. So we ask for your consideration on these matters so that we can still afford to stay in Santa Clara, a city that, as you know, I very much love. My office is here, my church is here, my children's school is here, and we love being a part of this community and providing this additional service. We understand it's a different marketplace. You know, homeschooling co-ops are not the convention, but at the same time, I think you'll see by some of our students here tonight, they are outstanding young men and women, and I hope great future leaders of our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any staff comments on what Mr. Crusoe's asking for?
see. Mr. Caruso, could you just please clarify again? You said on E11,
Yes.
that you're requesting that that one be removed?
Yes, because the covenant that is written and was discussed was for the driveway access points, and those have to be built to all the current standards. But this one relates to the sidewalk, and the sidewalk condition was removed. Even at our last PCC meeting, it was removed, that we don't have to do all the sidewalks along the frontage. I'm just concerned, maybe you can clarify, if this is not relating to sidewalks, that's fine, but it seemed to imply, when it said frontage, I was concerned.
Right. Okay, so we can clarify that, but the most important part that we cannot waive is when the driveway slope has to be corrected so it doesn't exceed a 2% slope.
Correct.
So that's the only area that, as far as staff knows, that's what we are referring to, but we can clarify that language.
Perfect.
It has to be built to city standard, but we would not require new sidewalks around the frontage. That was agreed upon.
Yes.
Okay, so do we need to change the language or?
Yes, we can clarify that on the final conditions of approval.
And then 15, E15.
That is also a regional standard that we use through VTA's guidelines, and so we apply that to every project. So that's not something we usually void as well, so.
They don't need to?
No, we would require that one. We would not, that's something that we comply with the VTA standards for alternative modes of transportation, and so it should be there on site. Because while maybe the children are brought in by cars, the staff and any other employees could be also riding bikes. So we make that provision to allow for all other types of transportation.
So we need that in place?
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And the C5, masonry wall?
So the masonry wall requested in that condition is standard with our zoning ordinance for commercial or other types of uses that interface with residential uses. And so that was incorporated as this would be our opportunity to seek conformance with the zoning ordinance in that regard. But it's up to the commission's discretion.
Oh, I see.
We beg for your indulgence on that, since we don't have any play areas or anything along the back property line, and the side, as you see, is also fairly open. So, and actually the right-hand side, half of that has already a masonry wall because there's a condominium project next door, and they built it when they did theirs. So we do beg your indulgence on C5 then to not make that a requirement, since it is not part of the original conditions. So we beg your indulgence on that.
And just to clarify, as Ms. Bustos was mentioning, the reason why we didn't require the masonry wall is because it was basically couched or proposed as a temporary use, so we would not impose a development standard like that. At this point, it's in the code, but again, the commission can void that.
So it's a difference between temporary versus permanent.
We wouldn't request that level of investment for that type of use. But if the commission's considering that, we could always, if you want more deliberation on that, we could offer some suggestions as an alternative for you to consider.
Is like maybe a wood fence instead of masonry, for example?
Yes, we could. I think we had asked the applicant to obtain a discussion and then possibly a letter in favor of the existing conditions. And in absence of that, I'm not sure if that was obtained or that was attempted.
I spoke verbally to a couple of them, and they were fine with the fences as they were because they're well maintained. None of them really gave anything in writing, though. But they're generally all in excellent condition. And as I said, all of our play areas are away from those fences. And that I know of, there's never been a record at all, a complaint on record about the fences or any noise coming from that site in the 5 years that we have occupied the site.
Can you describe what the existing
Okay,
fences are?
Commissioner
Yes.
Salam.
Thank you. Can you describe what the existing fences are?
There are a minimum of 6-foot wood fences on about probably 70% of the site, and then about maybe 25 to 30% on the right-hand side of the site that you're looking at has the concrete masonry fence between us and the condominium project that's built maybe 10 years ago.
Okay, and then what's the condition and age of the wood fences? Are they going to need replacement?
The condition of them are all in state of repair. They're all they're currently standard. And of course, in good neighbor policy, if anything comes in disrepair, we're happy to fix it. And that could go on public record that we will maintain, our fair share of maintenance on those fences.
Okay, Commissioner Jain?
Yes, I'm looking at the weekly operating school schedule.
Yes.
And I see on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7:30 to 3 p.m., there's 195 students and 55 faculty. How many of those are actually going to be on site?
Of those students and faculty?
So this is kind of an online school?
No,
and so-
no.
Oh, it's
It's
all
a
of these
homeschool
people are going to
co-op.
be here?
Yeah, it's a homeschool co-op. The children and the
So you're gonna
teachers
have-
are there.
So you're going to have almost 200 students and 55 faculty there on site on those days?
It's actually currently a bit less than that. This was sort
Right.
of our maximum
Right,
range.
I understand.
Yes.
And it's a K to 12 now?
Yes, sir.
Right. And, Homestead is a very busy street, and I see under the conditions that you don't need the street parking to accommodate the number of cars that will be coming to the site.
Oh, correct.
So,
We are fully parked on site.
right, so you would be amenable to restricting that there would not be any parking along Homestead to increase the bicycle safety and the,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that we're trying to encourage kids to be active, to not be driven to school all the time. And your request to reduce the number, I think that the number of parking spots, 10 and 8, is a very small number of bicycle
Bicycle
parkings.
spaces. Yeah.
And, I think that now that you're requesting that we remove that even, that's E15, doesn't make sense to me.
Well, we're hoping, again, it's cost consciousness. We're hoping that we can do a bicycle rack. So we're not saying not to provide. We're just saying instead of, this is requiring,
Lockers,
bike
yeah,
lockers and
yeah.
everything else. And that simply doesn't happen on a church site normally. It might be normal on a commercial site or multifamily. But on a church site, usually you have a bike rack and people can come, they can lock up their bike, and we're happy to do that. We're just saying these bike lockers are a few thousand each, I believe. They're not cheap. So we're just hoping we can still accomplish the same objective, fulfill the intent of the regulation without the onerous of the cost.
So would you be amenable to having 10% of the students biking, which would mean maybe 20 bike racks rather than the lockers?
I think that's fine. I think
You
that's
have
fine. Just
space
as
to
a
do
bike
that?
rack and they can lock them up, sure.
Correct, yeah, yeah.
I think
So-
it encourages the right direction and it makes it cost effective where we can do it and it satisfies the intent.
Okay, and finally, since Silicon Valley Power is asking you to add conduits that are
Yes.
through basically the parking lot,
Yes.
and, teachers can't afford to live in Santa Clara, so they have long commutes. And if they're driving to the site in, a gas-burning car, they're contributing to pollution. And I was wondering if you would be amenable to putting in some EV charging stations or at least pre-wiring for them for later installation, since you're already putting in
Massive conduits and so
massive
on.
conduits, yeah.
I think we're open to explore it. I don't know without knowing the cost to make a commitment to it, but we're certainly welcome, to explore it, maybe to have us review that item in a year or two and take a look. And we're happy to explore that. I mean, it's the right thing to do environmentally. I just have to see, number one, since it's not come up before, do we have the circuitry capacity? Meaning, is the amperage of our main panel adequate? Those kind of things. Because if it requires panel change, then that's a significant
I understand.
thing.
I guess I'm saying, given that would you install the conduit for 2 charging stations in the condition where you don't have to update the panels and the transformers?
To install the conduit, I think we probably could. If I would say this, if you're able to give us the exemption on the fencing, then yes, we can probably do that because that's something more feasible that we can excavate ourselves. I can go get, an excavator and trench and put in the conduits that we can afford to do, through our own, elbow
you-
grease, as they say.
Well, you're already trenching for the conduit anyway,
Yes.
right? So it'd be, and you'd have to resurface the parking lot subsequent to that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just the trenching would go further to kind of to the building and so
understand.
on, which is a little different. But yes, so if we were to do that in exchange for the fence, then that would make sense economically. We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly.
Okay, just a couple things for the applicant. This existing fence, you said, is a wood fence currently, correct?
Predominantly, yes.
Okay,
And some-
and chain link, or?
No,
Just all
along
wood?
the residential interface, it's either wood or masonry currently.
Okay.
The chain link was on the San Tomas Expressway side.
Okay, gotcha. And then the wood fence, the condition is good,
Yes,
fair?
it's good.
Okay. My concern, obviously, with children playing with the wood fence is if some of the neighbors have pets, and typically, after about 10 years, the kickboard, starts bending, pets can dig underneath it. I had a terrible problem with my pet, and I ended up just going with a 2x12 kickboard, and after that, my dog wouldn't dig
Good,
underneath.
yeah.
So what I would hope, if you are going to have children there full-time, that if the fence needs any repairs, the repairs be made, and if the kickboards need to be replaced, replace them with a 2x12 kickboard, so you have a sturdy foundation for the fence if we're going to go with a wood fence.
I would say that makes perfect sense.
As far as the bike racks, I'm fine with that. And then I think I'm okay with the other item that you requested as well, so.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would the member of the public like to speak? Yes, please come up and
Really quickly on that electric vehicle charging thing. If you, cyber switching in North San Jose has a technology that rotates charging among 4 different vehicles, and if you have high level 2 charging, you can charge 4 different cars per primary circuit, so they only need 2 primary circuits to charge 8 vehicles.
thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Luke Cho. I'm a recent graduate from the School of Live Oak Academy. And my family and I have been very privileged to serve and be part of the Live Oak community for the past 4 years. And it's my desire that this place, this school and community will continue to give its benefits to my siblings coming after me in the years to come. Also, I would like to request that the concrete wall be removed from the permit. I honestly have no recollection of being back there at all and don't think that it should be allowed in the permit at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heard something a little bit here, so I wanted to say thank you all for having us here today. And so just so you guys know me, my name's Asanam, and I'm also a student at Live Oak going into my senior year. And Live Oak has provided me with a great way to learn in a way that wouldn't be possible at a regular high school, being able to take classes and other activities that wouldn't be possible without Live Oak. And without this lovely campus to learn at, none of anything I've done in high school would actually be possible. With that being said, as me and a bunch of other people will most likely say, we do definitely urge you to remove this condition about the concrete wall, and that you would see that in fact nobody ever really goes back there, and that it should be considered. And with that, I'd like to thank you and hope that you would continue to support our school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Emma Rose Alva, and I am an incoming junior at Live Oak Academy. This will be my 5th year attending Live Oak, and the reason that I've been going here for so long has been because they have great teachers who really care about how well you do in your classes. They have very, very friendly students who really and genuinely want to be your friend. And they also have amazing classes that really get you through high school with an experience that no other school would offer. And I would really, really urge the city council to let us stay in Santa Clara without this brick or this concrete wall, as no one has really gone back there in the past. It really hasn't been a problem for us. And again, I'd really like to thank you for letting us have this location in the city, and I'd hope that we continue to be in this location.
Thank you.
My name is Lucas Owen, and I'm going to be a sophomore at Live Oak next year. All my siblings and I have been at Live Oak for a very long time, and we've been very privileged to have that campus at Santa Clara. Before we actually got that campus, we were moving every year to a different campus, so having a permanent residence there would give us some stability as a school. And once again, as many of my friends have already stated, we would really appreciate it if you remove the condition of the concrete fence, because it really isn't necessary, because no one ever goes back into that area and it doesn't pose a threat to any of us. And further, it wasn't part of the original agreement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Camille Lindsay, and I will be going into 9th grade in the fall at Live Oak Academy. My family has enjoyed going to Live Oak Academy at this location, and I have loved my past 3 years there. And I would like to request that the condition of the concrete fence be removed, since it was never a part of the original permit, and that was approved years ago, and no one goes back there basically at all. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Delali Bruce. I'm going to be a 10th grader at Live Oak Academy this fall. I started homeschooling in 3rd grade, and we've been here and this is going to be my 6th year attending. I cherish the many memories I have created on this beautiful campus, and I, among all my fellow classmates, hope to remain on this campus next year and in the future. I also ask that you remove the condition of the concrete wall, as it was never part of original approval, and as everyone who said before me, we never really go back there. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gracie. I will be an incoming 10th grader. This past year was my first year at Live Oak. I transferred from a private school. And what my parents really loved about Live Oak was that not only allowed me, my siblings, and I to grow as intellectuals, but it also allowed us to grow our character and who we were as a person and all the hobbies that we participated in. And I really would appreciate it if you allow us to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Camarina, a 10th grader at Live Oak Academy. The many families who attend this school have been very happy to have Live Oak Academy located in the city of Santa Clara, and hope to remain here to serve both the local community and the Bay Area. Our school's mission is to foster creativity, maturity, knowledge, and wisdom in every area of learning. LOA provides a classical Christian educational service for homeschool families like mine, providing students with excellent studies within a loving, nurturing environment. For this kind of environment, the campus of the First Presbyterian Church of Santa Clara is an ideal operating location. This church, our current campus, has worked very well for both us and for our neighbors. The staff are friendly and no negative issues ever occur. We ask that the condition of the concrete fence be removed, since it was never part of the original permit signed years ago for our current campus. Thank you for your consideration of our permit request.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elisa Chain, and I'm currently a junior at Live Oak Academy, and this is my 5th year at this school. And what I love most about Live Oak is the caring, intentional, and homey community here at Live Oak Academy, whether it is interacting with my friends at the picnic tables or asking my teachers questions at office hours at the portables. The campus has worked well for everyone, and I hope that the school will remain here at Santa Clara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kakaylee Bruce, and I will be going into 7th grade at Live Oak Academy. I love having the campus in Santa Clara, and it's very convenient and in a friendly area. The campus is a wonderful place for a school and a wonderful place to hang out. Also, since the concrete fence was not a part of the Academy's original approval, it would be great if it would be removed. It is not in an ideal condition. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Katie. This will be my second year at Live Oak. As my twin sister said, we transferred from a private school, and this Live Oak is not like any other school we've ever been to. It truly wants us to grow no matter what our quirks are, our unique gifts and talents. And we are a quiet school. We're not loud or rowdy. And so by removing the concrete, by not having us do that, it won't hinder anything because since we are a quiet, small, and studious community, the neighbors have not complained about us since we're just there to learn, and I think they love having us there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca DeBoard, and I'll be going into 10th grade next year. Live Oak has been such a blessing for my family. We moved there 3 years ago, and I'm so happy that we're still there. I have made many new friends, many of which come from very far away. Santa Clara is the perfect place for Live Oak Academy. It's in the middle of everything, so we can have students come from very far away. Because we have such a beautiful community there, we urge you not to move us, and we thank you so much for considering and letting us stay there for many years to come.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Heidi Lay, and I am a rising sophomore at Live Oak Academy. My family and I have been very privileged to be at this location, and we hope to remain here. This location has been very convenient for us since it is nearby a library, so we can access it pretty readily. And I also request that the condition of the concrete fence to be removed. It was never part of the original plan. Thank you for your consideration of our permit request.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Jessie Lay, and I am entering 7th grade this fall at Live Oak Academy. My oldest sister and I have been happy in Santa Clara, and we wish to stay here and benefit our community. The school is the right fit for us with good teachers and good friends, and I hope the concrete fence will be taken out as it was not part of the original permit approved years ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Gabrielle Camarina, and I'm going into 8th grade this year. And 6 of my siblings, including myself, go to Live Oak Academy. And we don't ever go near the fence, and it's very quiet, and it's a very enjoyable school. And so I don't think a concrete wall is very necessary. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Speaker cards, but we're going to go ahead and get in line with everyone else. My name is Lisa Wright. I was here 5 years ago. I've lived at Crystal Glen, one of the next door neighbors to Live Oak, for 31 years from when it was originally built. I also wanted to clarify that 5 years ago, there were residents from both planned developments that are next door neighbors to Live Oak. We are here representing 35 homes at Crystal Glen that are next door to Live Oak, and there were representatives 5 years ago from the other newer development. It was more than one resident that spoke up last time. So we have some things to talk about that have to do with Live Oak currently, and then also our concerns about an indefinite permit. We were the ones that were supporting the temporary permit because we do, as neighbors who, again, I've lived there for 31 years, we want to have some say in what's happening next door to us. Some of the problems that we had with Cardin Academy, the previous tenants that were there briefly, prior to them, there was no school there at all. We still have problems with people making both left turns and U-turns in the middle of Homestead in a very dangerous way. And right now, with all of the construction going on on San Tomas Expressway with our left, right turn lanes and San Tomas itself, it's very dangerous for us to even leave our homeowners complex. 5 years ago, the city had promised to paint Keep Clear and white striping in front of our driveway, and that never happened. It would have helped now that we have all the construction going on at San Tomas. Most of our concerns have to do with the fact that I believe the permit goes with the space, not with the tenant. And we had, can I speak for my
yes,
partner
you
here?
can.
We had huge issues with Cardin Academy when they were there prior to Live Oak. There were traffic problems, noise problems,
minutes.
rudeness. You want to mention the?
Yeah, there were teachers that came to our complex and they weren't allowed to smoke there, so they came and smoked on our complex. And on my townhouse specifically, they were letting out the butts and putting it against the wall. I was not home, but a neighbor saw them, threatened to call the police, and then they left. I did not know I was supposed to put in a complaint to anyone. I would like to have a person's number, a phone number, to do that in the future.
So Francis's unit is right at the driveway that goes to Crystal Glen, to Homestead Road. Let's see.
So this is the complex on Lippert Place?
No, that's
Okay, I
the
see
newer
it.
one,
Oh,
and
yeah,
ours
okay,
is
I
the
see
one
it
that's
now.
been there longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, we're not trying to get rid of Live Oak Academy. It is an improvement over Cardin. We did work with Salvatore quite a bit 5 years ago to try and get this temporary permit straightened out. Although the school itself doesn't benefit us as homeowners in any way, we're more concerned about an indefinite permit because we're benefiting right now from the Apple complex. Our property values have skyrocketed. And we don't want our property values to go down because if another school came in and it lowered our property values, that is a possibility. Nobody really wants to live next to a school. It's not where you choose to live. There wasn't a school there when we originally bought our home. Let's see. And so especially if a high school went in there, we would have concerns. I'm not talking about the Live Oak high schoolers, but again, a regular high school that could go in. We don't want to have to deal with things like drugs, drinking, gangs, violence. We would have no control, no say over who's our next door neighbor.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing? It would be helpful for us to have a contact at Live Oak Academy. There was a board member who had some issues with noise, and if we had a contact name and phone number,
Sure, you already
someone she
mentioned
could
that,
call.
so I'm sure we'll follow up on that.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
you.
very much. All right, so before we have the rebuttal, what is the issue on the striping? I remember this vaguely from the last time.
There was a requirement in front of their driveway because they said people were pulling in the driveway and parking there so they couldn't get out of the complex. And it was actually the obligation of the school that was supposed to have that striped and paid for. So the city can do it, but we had to be reimbursed for it. So that obligation can still go forward.
Live Oak Academy was Live Oak Academy, not the Cardin that was supposed to do that?
It carried the conditions were supposed to be, it was for Live Oak.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right. Okay, rebuttal? And before Mr. Crusoe speaks, I'd like to thank the students who made the time to come here and participate in this, be civically engaged. You were well prepared and well spoken, so thank you very much.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for coming down. I am always a point of contact. My company is right here in Santa Clara on El Camino, 98 El Camino Real. She or any neighbor is always welcome. Please to contact my office. I'm also on the board of Live Oak Academy, so I am an official contact person for you at any time in the future, should you show need.
Okay, I have to ask you to
I'll
refrain
exchange.
from
Yeah.
speaking with each other, please.
So I will provide my my number and contact from myself and the school.
Thank you.
The neighbor who came spoke about, and rightfully so, about Cardin Academy's activities and not her own, and she was very clear in distinguishing, well, these were complaints about the cigarette buds and whatever else was Cardin Academy and not us. So I just want to make sure that that's clear for the record. Conditional use permits are written this way, meaning they do go with the land. We ask you to approve our use. I hope you will find us worthy to be approved based on our behavior, not someone else's behavior, but on our behavior and the appropriateness of this CUP. As staff has mentioned, it is an appropriate use for the site from a zoning point of view. It is on a corner, on an intersection, which makes it also better for access to the site. The clarification on the striping, I was not aware. I apologize. My mea culpa. I did think it was something the city would do and we would reimburse, but we can certainly work with you, and we are now fully aware and on public record that it needs to get done, the striping, and it will be done. As far as the rest of the conditions, they stand the same, and we hope you will find us, as I said, worthy. City Council's condition when they heard of us going forward and directed to give the temporary condition, it was, if you are able to perform for first the 4 years and then the 1-year extension that Planning Commission granted, to perform without complaints, without any serious problems and or traffic issues, if you show that you are worthy and you are able to meet, the conditions of behavior, sound, and be a good neighbor, then you will be made a permanent condition. So it was fully knowledgeable. I did go back and listen to the City Council full tape, and they were very explicit. They said, if you perform and the school performs properly without complaint, like was common with Cardin, then you would be granted the permanent CUP. So that is the premise in which we have operated and hope to continually operate in this beautiful city of Santa Clara.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Was the permit ever promised by the City Council?
I don't know what was said because I didn't review the tape, or I don't think Rebecca did either, but the condition was, it was always proposed as a temporary use. Of course, someone can make a second application or third, or in the term itself under this permit, while it's requested for in perpetuity, it can be limited again. So it's just up to the commission what they want to do.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so motion to close public hearing?
Close public hearing. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right, discussions. Commissioner Chahal. Oh, no, Commissioner Jain.
Yeah, I think that, constructing a concrete wall is very onerous in terms of expense. And given that there have not really been any complaints, aside from cigarette butts, it makes sense to waive that requirement. I also agree that bike lockers can be expensive, and that to waive that sort of onerous expense might be acceptable. I'm pleased that the applicant is willing to trade some other conditions for removing those conditions, primarily adding 20 bike racks, spots for 20 spots in bike racks, adding the conduit for the EV chargers, and removing parking along Homestead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chahal?
Question for staff, if we have not the permanent CUP, but let's say we renew it 4 years or so, how much is the paperwork for the applicant to come back, and or how much are the fees, etc.? Is it a lot of burden for the applicant, or?
Well, they would have to pay the full fee again.
And that is roughly?
Well, it escalates every couple of years because the costs for the staff to do business and to recuperate the costs would change. So it might rise up, say it's 4% a year, 2 to 4% a year. It depends upon how we assess the staff time involved in preparing a report to commission.
So to get an idea, do you know what fees they paid currently? Just an idea?
I think the use permit's $9,000, around $9,300 or $8,900.
For 4 years?
Well, it's for the process of the use permit itself. it's almost $9,000 now. So in 4 years, it could be 11 or 12,000.
And they have to pay that every renewal?
If the term is limited and so that was granted for the 4-year period, essentially upon expiration, they're required to reapply. So all the considerations related to any site conditions or operational analysis, all that has to be reevaluated, so they'd have to pay the fee again.
Is there a way like we can fast track that process with let's say we do not have any complaints? Because I'm trying to safeguard the residents, because a high school can be a very good high school,
right,
and it can be a very bad high school. To protect our residents, what can we do to limit that and not to punish the applicant so that we can save some money to them on the renewal process, if at all possible?
Sure. We have had similar situations. I'll have to try to recall the use, but we did put in stipulations that there would be checks, just like how we do the periodic reviews of the use. And so there was one use permit that was conditioned to where it had a 12-month review, 18-month review, and then 24 months. And then at that point, if there were no problems, it would become permanent. So if you wanted to, you could revisit, say, in 2 years, and then we could do, you could extend the life of the permit, or you could just continue to have check-ins, in that the extension of time, it would be built in a 2-year extension upon a 2-year review. Any length of time you feel comfortable with, and that it could be processed as a minor amendment to extend the term. There are a variety of options. It just depends what time frame you're talking about.
So in those reviews, the applicant doesn't have to pay any fees. It basically, staff submits a review report. Right. It was good if there is no complaint, and then it can be reviewed every 2 years. It can be a permanent CUP, but subject to renewal every 2 years.
Well, then it wouldn't be permanent. It would be, I would say, if you have a condition, that we would basically do a periodic review, and then if there was an issue, we have the revocation process. But that's a very onerous process. If you wanted to limit the term, say expires every 5 years, and then there's a periodic review every 2 years. So we, just like how we report on a beer and wine license, and see if there's any calls for service or traffic complaints, that kind of thing. That could be done with a minimal amount of staff time involved.
Okay, good. I would like to, if chair permits, I would like to take an opinion from the applicant if we have that type of a condition of renewal.
Yes, please.
What I would suggest, if there is a desire that it can be made permanent with a review every 5 years or something, or 4 years, something like that, but not a reapplication, because reapplication then subjects us every single time to not just fees, but new requirements. If something else becomes a new requirement, suddenly that is what we do and are obliged to do. So if it can be made permanent with a 5-year review, and there is a revocation process for a CUP, yes, it may be onerous, but it also is a tool that if there are, egregious things, but bear in mind, there's been no egregious behavior in 5 years that we've been there. So we do have a track record. So in some of the conditions that were mentioned, you review typically bar permits or club permits every year, 18 months, 36 months. That's more traditional. For a school, not so traditional, meaning that we're usually not considered a less than desirable thing. And property value should not be taken into account, because this is really about a use that is beneficial to the community at large. A school is not an evil. It is a good, especially when a school is a good neighbor. And I do respect and understand bad neighbors, but we have been a good neighbor.
Yeah, I'm trying to go to a middle ground where we protect the rights of the existing residents, as well as we give you a leeway so that you don't have to do all the paperwork and submit the fees every 4 years. So we're trying to find out a middle ground where they feel comfortable and you feel comfortable as an applicant. And I know your students are great. They spoke very eloquently, and I praise them very well. And it's a good asset to have a school in the community. We are not denying that. And residents are happy with what the Live Oak School is doing over there right now. So we are only talking about hypothetical situation if tomorrow somebody else
Sure,
comes
sure.
over there,
Sure,
and
sure.
then we, so I think we can have a, maybe 3 years, let's go to middle ground. We said 2, you said 5, we go to
Okay,
3 years
let's have other
Yep.
commissioners.
Okay,
please. Thank you,
thank you.
Commissioner Chahal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly.
Couple questions for staff. First, let's talk about the fence. Since we want to keep the wood fence, can we have an inspector inspect the fence, verify the condition is in good condition as a condition of approval?
Well, we don't have a building inspector that would do that because they're not subject to building permits. Are you mean the wood fence or
Wood fence.
the wood fence? Again, if it's a residential fence, there's no building permit associated with them because they're permitted by right. So I don't know that we would send a building inspector out to go look at that. We can, staff could possibly go look at the condition of the fence. I mean, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
I just would like to verify it's a good condition. My fear is that as one of the neighbors has a pet, the pet gets out, and you never know if it's a friendly dog or unfriendly dog. And since we are talking about a fence where children
Sure, okay,
are
so
separated-
we can have that as one of the conditions.
Okay. I'd like to see the striping as a condition of approval. I'm okay. We can do a 5-year review, correct? So, to save them money? Okay. And then if code enforcement is contacted regarding like people smoking in the adjacent complex, code enforcement can call the school, correct?
Well, the smoking is a little bit difficult because there's not a prohibition against it. It's just a matter, and we don't have anything yet on, the city is working on that for multifamily, so proximity of smoking in multifamily developments. But right now, I don't know what the nature of the smoking that would be subject to enforcement.
But if somebody reports it to the city, then it will, if we were to have a reviewing process, it would come up as part of the review, would it not?
Well, that somebody smoking nearby?
Well, if somebody makes a call to complain for any reasons, smoking or parking violation.
If it's not something actionable that we can deal with, we would not keep a record of it.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. But staff can make sure this time that the striping does take place. Okay. Thank you.
And when the review comes up, will the neighbors be notified?
Yes, for any of the reviews that we have, we do notice the same notification that we use for the primary permit.
So that will be an opportunity for the neighbors to lodge their, express their opinions. Okay. Commissioner Jane? Do we have anyone else?
Yeah, I don't know if this is for Mr. Caruso or for staff. Let's say we had a number of students say they never go back to the back area. Let's say the school decided to build a play structure right there in the back. Do they have to come to the city?
Yes.
For building a play structure? Okay.
And if, I understand that the use permit normally would run with the land and not with the school, but is there any way we can limit it to the Live Oak Academy?
We have on occasion actually tied it to an applicant, but you could say that upon transfer to a new school, that it has to come forward to the Planning Commission for review and approval. The likelihood is the student count may be different, so they would only be able to operate the same schedule that is stated in the use permit.
Okay.
So
All
right
right.
now, it's there's a set schedule, but you could have a condition that if it changes operators, that it has to return to the Planning Commission for renewal of the use permit.
For renewal. Okay. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to pass to approve the conditional use permit to allow a K-12 private school on the existing church site at 2499 Homestead Avenue, Santa Clara, California, with the additional condition of review after 3 years. And if Chair Ikezi wants to add the condition of change of owner, I can add that.
Yes, I'd like to see that.
So
An application renewal
on the application, if that ownership changes, then that has to come back to the city
for the renewal.
for the renewal.
Not the review, but renewal.
Renewal, right.
What about the
that it?
concrete fence and the?
I think for the time being, I'm okay with it, but if we can put a condition, if there's a complaints from the neighborhood, it can be renewed, it can be come back to us for a
Really need to decide now whether or not you're accepting that condition subject to verification that it's in good condition and will be maintained in good condition. You'd have something of that nature just to qualify that it has to be maintained in good condition.
So I'm okay with that right now because we have a renewal process, and if in case the renewal process has some limitations, the neighborhood can always come back, and we can, during the renewal process, we can always look at that thing over there. And
No, it's not a renewal.
It's not a renewal. It'll be, yeah, a
sorry.
review.
At the review process, we can always look into that.
Mention any of the conditions of approval that are not satisfied or need to be addressed. That's fine.
That's fine. Perfect.
Okay, so that's your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay, I'd like to second that motion with friendly amendments or some additional change, some additions. Okay, so we are modifying the language for condition E11 to have the slope meet the ADA requirements instead of the entire sidewalk, and to change the E15 to call for 20 bike racks instead of bike lockers, and for C5 to change to wood fence is acceptable, 6-foot wood fence, with the staff visiting to check the condition at least once before this permit is renewed. No parking on Homestead. Striping, that was striping to be implemented as promised during the previous renewal process. Conduit for EV chargers be installed for 2 parking spaces. And the applicant to use 2x12 kickboard on the fence if a repair is required. And that's it.
I accept.
I'm sorry, Cherry Casey, if I may. I'm not sure that it is legally permissible to condition a use permit to run just with the owner. Use permits legally run with the land.
Okay, so requiring a renewal is not legal.
Right.
Requiring a review is acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, so would Commissioner Chahal like to amend
I'll accept those amendments.
So renewal every 3 years, or
Review.
whenever the
Yep, review.
Review every 3 years, or a new school takes over the property.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion on the floor? Any discussions?
Can we just mention the parking along Homestead, since we have to check with the traffic engineer? That's something we'd have to refer to them to consider. It's really outside since it's public right-of-way.
Okay.
So we couldn't commit to that. The staff couldn't commit to that at
Okay,
this point.
so the city to look into, from saying, amend the motion from no parking on Homestead to the city.
Subject to approval by the city traffic engineer?
Subject to approval by the city traffic department.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so we both agree. Anything else? So I seconded the motion. We have a motion on the floor. Any more discussions? Commissioner Jane? Nothing? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Oh, any opposed? None. Okay. Well, so
so just to mention that this action is final unless there's an appeal to the city clerk within 7 calendar days.
In writing. Okay, and
I have a request, like the residents should have a contact phone number for somebody on the school side. I know Mr. Crusoe mentioned his phone number, but it would be appropriate if somebody at the school site is responsible for attending their calls. Thank you.
Okay, and I'd like to thank again to the students who came to talk to us. Thank you. Okay, moving on to next item, which is 18-524. Action on a rezoning and minor modification at 554 Saratoga Avenue.
Chairman, can we take a 2-minute break for?
Okay, 2-minute break. All right, so we will convene at, yeah, 8:15. We'll convene at 8:15.
Very warm.
A lot of stuff to talk about, so we need one to be quick today.
I like just dressed down with a t-shirt on today. I know. I have never been to yes, Rebecca said, I better grab my sweater. I'm running around. Like a lot of
You're back.
I know.
All right, we're reconvening. Everyone, please get back to your seat. Where are Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Chahal? Okay, we're reconvening. Ella, is Saratoga your project? Is Saratoga your project, Ella?
The one, next one. Oh, Rebecca's, okay, we have to wait for her. No, I forgot. What was the second again?
So you're,
Yeah, he was there.
so he's as tired as I am.
Oh, yeah, this one. Okay, the house. Yeah, the house project. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. We don't have the planners now. I thought we were gonna do that. Okay. Well, anyway. Okay. So can we reconvene? Where's Steve? Okay. Where's Rebecca? Okay.
And being honest.
Well, you probably just need to get a Keurig there or something, because then, yeah.
What happened to Rebecca? Where is she? What happened to Rebecca and Gloria? Where did they go? Do you know what happened to them?
Lost the stuff. We lost the stuff. They're excused.
Are we excused then? Thank you. Where did Rebecca go? Okay, they're there. Okay.
They have issues, but they haven't had as many issues as we have. But what they do is, because it's an intermittent problem, we need to have a Granicus employee here at one of our planning commissions.
Oh, yeah, we want to reconvene.
Council meetings. There was an issue of probably setting up their accounts properly, because I can't open any of the accounts.
Okay, everyone's back, so let's continue with project on Saratoga. And should we close the door or ask people who?
Thank you. Chair Ikeze and members of the commission, the application before you this evening is a request for rezoning of a property at 554 Saratoga Avenue. It's located on the northwest corner of Scott Boulevard in Saratoga, and it is zoned currently professional office, and the request is to zone it to single-family residential. The property was originally built as an office, a small office, and there are some other ones nearby with the same one-story appearance and more neighborhood-serving offices. And the proposal is to convert the existing building to a single family that would consist of 3 bedrooms, a home office, 1.5 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage. So this is an image of the property. And it is on the, the radius of there at Saratoga. This is the south elevation, west elevation. There's a lot of concrete pavement, so there would be some additional landscaping that would need to be enhanced with the project. There's currently a garage portion here. There was some activity done by the prior tenant, so part of it is converted, but it would be subject to building permits and park fees since it was not considered previously a residence. So there's a little bit of a challenge, which is our general plan consistency, and I'll just explain our approach to this is under the community mixed use designation that's currently on this property, there was anticipated potential mixed use developments since it was on a major intersection. And the density range under this classification is 20 to 36 dwelling units per acre, and a commercial requirement of 0.10 FAR, floor area ratio, to the lot size. And so the project is as a single family unit, their one dwelling unit would be a density range of 5.2. And under our general plan policies, there's some discretionary policies where you can go one density range lower, which would be 10 to 18 units, But because this range would be below that, we're looking at that as of other alternatives that are available under the general plan policy, such as neighborhood compatibility and consistency with existing land use patterns, transition policies, and by those we would that supports the proposal of maintaining a single-family structure there and then allowing the conversion. So for that reason, we still feel we could support the proposal. The next density range would be, again, no less than 10, but this would be half of that. And the site is large enough to accommodate an accessory dwelling unit, and that is something we discussed with the applicant, and they are considering in the future. So there are a couple of minor modifications. We're just giving you information for your reference, since this would be approved by the zoning administrator. And the front setback would be, rather than 20 foot, it would be 16 foot 3 inches, and the interior side yard would be 4 feet 9 rather than 5 feet. And again, some of this was because the right-of-way was acquired by the city and the streets widened, so those are some of the resulting conditions as a result of the building predating that widening. And this is just an image of the site plan. It shows you those minor deficiencies in the setback. For the front yard, it's just on one portion of the house that it is reduced beyond 20, and the side yard setback is just, again, 3 inches from our current standard. And because it's a single unit of construction, it would only be considered a categorical exemption. We're allowed to do up to 4 units without doing an environmental document beyond the categorical exemption. And considerations for you is that the use is consistent with the surrounding residential neighborhood. There's single family and duplexes, small developments such as that. There's no significant traffic or other environmental impacts associated with the proposal. The building is similar in scale and mass to the surrounding properties, and the applicant will certainly speak to this, but they previously had an office use in that location for several, actually I think 3 decades, and are now retiring, and so for that reason they're looking to convert the building. So given the existing conditions, the staff is supportive of the proposal and recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval to rezone from CT to plan development. And oh, I'm sorry, we have the wrong recommendation. It's from professional office to single family. I apologize, I'm not sure where this one came from. So there it is. Wait a minute. Now I can't see my screen. Just one second. This is the alternative to deny the application, and it would remain then professional office. But we are supporting the rezoning to single family. And I'll conclude there and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Commissioner Jane.
Yeah, it seems like this was zoned for office and then it was illegally converted to residential. Is that correct? Yeah.
I believe there was some alteration of the building, and I think it was for a time used as a residential property, but it's been fairly recent.
So I guess my question is, since the city had originally in the general plan sort of wanted office to be there, is there a zoning designation that allows for both future office there? Or would they just have to go through a whole new rezoning if somebody in the future wanted to put an office there? There's no zoning designation that would allow for either use.
The mixed use, but I have to look at the development standards because I think you need a bigger size lot to allow the mixed use zoning district. So sometimes
this could be
like 20,000 square feet before you can rezone to that zoning classification. So the only other alternative is a PD to allow both the use currently and if they want to redevelop in the future. But they really would have to amend the PD again if they wanted to do a mixed use.
Right. So we're in the middle of a zoning update. Would this be something we might consider in a zoning update for the city?
No, we wouldn't, because if the general plan remained the same, then we would, yeah, we wouldn't pre-zone
But we could add a
things.
category in the zoning
There
code.
could be a small lot mixed use. I
Correct.
mean, if that's a
Correct.
consideration, certainly.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Does the huge amount of driveway meet the R1L standard? Isn't there like a landscaping coverage requirement?
We require 35% of the front yard landscaping, and there has to be impervious surface to get to a parking space. But other than that, it's the property owner's choice.
So this is okay, they don't need to?
We would have to quantify that to make sure, because it does need refurbishment of the landscaping. So you can't have dead lawn, or you have to have live plants.
Okay.
Or live material that constitutes landscaping.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, would the applicant like to tell us?
Good evening, Honorable Chair Ikizi and council members. My name is Jane Armstrong. I am the daughter of the property owners. My parents have owned this property for nearly 30 years. They're both retired now. They're 70 and 75, and English is not their first language, so they asked me to come and speak on their behalf. So the property was originally purchased in '89, and my father bought the property. There was a tenant in there, the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and they were there for 2 years. And then once the tenant left, my father started his State Farm insurance office there. So he was there for about 14 years. And then he retired in 2005. And then they started to lease the property out to various commercial tenants. So some of the tenants included like a dental lab. We had an insurance office. The agent who took over my dad's business was in there for like 4 or 5 years afterwards. And then they had a series of contractors, and one of the contractors had made some of those changes to, it was basically 2 detached garages, but they converted one of those garages into like a storage space, basically. So the intent of the rezone, this actual structure itself, you saw pictures of it. It blends in with the neighborhood very beautifully. We've known both those neighbors for many, many years, had really great relationships with them. And we want to turn it into just a regular residence. And my parents are actually planning on moving in there because they want to just retire in there now. So they've done a lot of traveling, and they went to their home country for a while and lived in Korea for about 10 years, and now they're back. And they want to just rezone it, live in there as a regular residence, and then just bring the property up to code so that they can actually live there. What else? What you guys did mention about the multi-use and having like multiple, like almost like a mini condo on that location. I know the neighbors would not like that, particularly one neighbor on our right side, because I know she's complained a lot about, there's a brand new condo complex across the street, and she's actually moving out of her house because of the condo complex. So I don't think that I would recommend doing that, and I don't think the neighbors next door would actually enjoy that. So I think they would prefer it to stay a quiet office or turn into a regular single-family residence. One other note, so my parents had a bit of a hard time, depending on the economy, on leasing out that property. So the property has been vacant many times. And of course, we didn't like that from a property owner standpoint because we were not making money. But also from just the neighborhood standpoint, I know the neighbors don't like it when it's empty all the time because you can have like vandalism or like homeless folks coming in for one reason or other. So my parents really thought it would be best to make it into a residence. And their intent right now is to first move into it. And then as they get older, not sure what will happen with them, but they're 70 and 75. So if they end up moving out of there, then maybe another family can move in eventually. So.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Would the member of the public like to speak? None? Okay, motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and discussions? None? Okay, any motion?
I can make a motion to recommend approval of rezoning from O8 to R16L as per staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
I need to, Madam Chair, I need to abstain from this item because I have a professional relationship with the applicant.
1900 Warburton?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item, 18-449, public hearing on action on residential townhouse project at 1900 Warburton.
Chair Casey, I just want to mention that I met with the developer last Friday, June 8th, and we talked about his project and some of the concerns about the little park in the back and a possibility of maybe changing the living room to a bedroom.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the request before you is located at 1900 Warburton. Currently on the property is Fuji Florist. The applicant is requesting adoption of their mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, rezoning of the 2.23 acre site from OG General Office to Planned Development. And actually, to clarify, the site is actually 0.55 acres. They're also requesting approval of their tentative condominium map to allow development of those 12 townhouse units. So as I said, there are 12 proposed units in 2 3-story buildings with 6 units each. There is an approximately 1,400 square foot outdoor common area located on the southeast corner of the property. Units would range in size from approximately 2,200 square feet to 2,430 square feet and would each include 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a 2-car garage. The building massing and 3-story design is consistent in scale with the adjacent commercial and multifamily residential development. The project does propose a complete street treatment along the frontage, which would consist of a 5-foot sidewalk and a 4-foot wide tree-lined planter strip adjacent to the curb. The project site has 1 shared access driveway down the center. The proposed conditions of approval do require that the 2-car garages that each of the units have be made accessible for 2-car covered parking at all time, and that they be wired to allow for electrical vehicle charging. Pursuant to the PD zoning code, at least 10% of the total required parking is required to be made available for guests. So based on 24 garage parking spaces, 3 guest spaces are required, and the applicant is providing 5 guest parking spaces. These are the proposed frontages that would face Warburton. The design is Mediterranean in style with stucco and wood finishes. The property is designated medium density residential and was found to be consistent with the general plan. This land use designation allows for a density of 20 to 36 dwelling units per acre. So the development of 12 units on the 0.55 acre site is within the intended density range at approximately 22 dwelling units to the acre. The allowance for planned development zoning is consistent with the site's general plan land use designation and addresses the site's unique configuration and interface with various land uses. The applicant did hold a community meeting on April 19th of this year. There are approximately 10 neighbors in attendance, and they expressed concern with some of the existing parking issues that exist in the neighborhood, as well as overall traffic issues. There was specific concern from residents of the nearby 1700 Civic Center Drive project that views from their condos may be blocked by the new buildings, and then potential privacy impacts to their private pool area. So as a result of that discussion, that is why the outdoor area was relocated. It used to be toward the center of the site, but it was relocated to provide a buffer with that adjacent pool area, which would be approximately here off the map. And then the number of guest parking spaces was increased to hopefully help alleviate the concern about neighborhood parking. So originally proposed they had 3 guest parking spaces, and they were able to fit in 5. So for the project, a mitigated negative declaration was prepared and circulated for 20 days. We did receive 6 comment letters from several community members, which identified concerns with traffic, potential aesthetic impacts, and construction noise. So the document identified required mitigation related to air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, and hazardous materials to reduce impacts to a less than significant level. So based on this, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend adoption of the MND and MMRP to the City Council, and also recommend approval of the rezoning to PD to allow development of the 12 townhouse units with the tentative condominium map as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions to the staff? Commissioner Jane?
I imagine that there will be an HOA to handle the shared parking and the common driveway and all of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Would the applicant like to tell us about your project?
Hi, good evening, Planning Commissioners. Samir Sharma, Managing Member for 1900 Warburton LLC. Staff and Rebecca did a great job of kind of mentioning the main points of what we're proposing here for the project. 12 townhome units. It's zoned for 11 to 20, so we're on the lower side of the density from the general plan. There are 3 different floor plan types. She already spoke on the on-site open space, roughly being about 1,400 square feet. Was actually a good thing by moving it to that southeast corner because we ended up gaining about 300 extra square feet of open space. I'll talk a little bit more on that after later on regarding the community outreach meeting. We're providing 5 on-site guest parking spaces. As she mentioned, 3 is required. Each of the units have their own 2-car garages. We also have on-site bike parking, and development will include 1 BMR unit and 0.2 in lieu fee. Moving on, some of the community features. Each unit will be pre-wired for level 2 car chargers. Also will be pre-wired for optional electrical dryer, and also be pre-wired for optional electrical water heater. So in theory, you could, if the owner chose, to have a fully electric home that wouldn't be reliant on gas. I did have a discussion with Commissioner Jan, and he brought up a good point about having the option to have a first floor bedroom, bathroom. So I had my architect actually design how that could look. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, it's something we could offer to the future buyers of these units if they have elderly folks who may want to stay on the ground level and have a bathroom there and a bedroom. That'd be a very good asset to the development. We also consider this development to be transit friendly. It's close to the bus stop, Caltrain, VTA. And within the HOA, we'd like to subsidize the transit passes for community members, the resident members of those townhomes. And that's something that'll be written into the CC&Rs. As well, we heard some issues about garages not being used for garages. So we were going to go ahead and install actually garage storage, and there's a small photo of how that looks up here. Typically, to make them pretty usable, you need about 8.5 to 9 foot ceiling heights in your garages. Our garages are actually 9.5 feet. So not only could you park your 2 cars, you could have bike parking, and you could have the overhead storage bins for your garage. Moving on. So we did have the neighborhood outreach meeting. It was actually very helpful to hear from the neighbors in the neighborhood on their thoughts on the development. Kind of reiterating, we increased our parking from 3 guest parking spots to 5. The park location was towards the center of the development. We moved it to the southeast corner of the development. That helped alleviate some of the concerns with the view corridor that the first and second floor units of the senior center that were worried about not being able to look out their windows and not see the same thing that they've seen for so many years. Also, with the moving of the park to that location, it helped with adding the 2 parking spaces. And privacy concerns were something else that came up. So we decided to use clear story windows on the back units that would be facing that direction, as well as placed mature trees along the back corridor of the development. It actually helps 2 things. 1, with the privacy, 2, with their pool, community pool being adjacent to the back side of the property. Over the time, the 24-inch box trees, which start off at about 9 feet, should grow about 2 to 3 feet a year and eventually get to 40 feet tall and up to about 30 feet wide. So it'll create some great screening for the pool area and for privacy. They'd also mentioned possibly concerns about the shadow that would be created within the neighborhood. So we went ahead and did a shadow study. Here's just, I was trying to show the old site plan. As you can see, the park's in the center. There it is. You can see the park's in the center. You can see 1, 2, 3 parking spots, and that right there is a community building, and the pool is located right about 10 feet off of that back property line. And now you go to the new site plan. See the park's back here. 1, 2, 3, as Rebecca already mentioned, 4, 5 parking spaces. And the 4 trees that are being planted are actually about 1, you can see on the landscape plans, 2, 3, 4 across the rear of the property. Here's a shadow study taken at 4 different times, 2 different time frames in December and 2 different time frames in June. First, I'll focus on December's. You can see the impact during December at 3 p.m. on the future development and how much impact it would have on the neighboring properties. Same thing here for 9 a.m. You can take a look at the same thing as well. Okay. And as well as June, we did the same thing. Oops, sorry. You can see it June at 9 a.m. Then you can see June at 3 p.m. How much shadow is created by our buildings. And it gives you a pretty good idea of where the pool's at, just so you have an idea from a privacy standpoint as well. You can see it on this angle. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the applicant? None?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Jen.
So I believe that you were considering adding a bedroom downstairs. Does that turn these into 4-bedroom places, or what is the story there?
No, so I was just talking with our architect who's here present today. So we turned the upstairs smallest bedroom into an office, a dedicated office. So you still have 3-bedroom units with the ground floor. So the option would entail turning the living room into a bedroom, bathroom, and then turning the upstairs, because right now it's living room, garage on the main floor. Second level is family room and kitchen and laundry room, and then third level is 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. So it changed that upstairs into a master with its own bathroom, a second bedroom with its own bathroom, and a dedicated office.
So you'll basically have 3 master bedrooms in this place?
Yes, yep, that's correct. 2 en suites and a master bedroom, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So no bathrooms in the family?
Yeah, there's a half bath there.
Oh, yeah, half bath, right,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, thank you. Would anyone in the public like to speak? Yes, please come up. And each of you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name's Eric Nystrom. I apologize for my cold. I'm the closest resident that's living near there. My yard is about 10 feet from their property. My pillow and my kid's pillow is about 25 feet. and I'm not exaggerating on that. My concern is with the mitigation plan, particularly noise and dust and dirt. It says that it'd be 85 dB at 50 feet away for typical construction equipment. Given how close I am, that's like a lawnmower outside my window. And it said that it was 7 a.m. to 6 for 4 to 5 months. That's a very long period to have that kind of noise. Oddly, the city actually supported us back in 2009. Back then, we were neighbors and close friends with the late Father Mark Catalana. He helped us with the city back when there was heavy construction equipment on that exact site. The then city manager Sparacino and Mayor Mahan sent us a letter saying that they resolved the situation, but that was just for about a month. It was just one truck and one tractor of heavy equipment, and I mean it was enough to make sort of the priest and head of vocations go insane. And so I'm kind of concerned what the construction for 5 months would do on my kids, given that they're going to school, they have homework, they need to be able to sleep in the morning. That's one thing. Also with the 10 feet to our yard, all of the dust here talks about mud on the road. I'm concerned about it coming the 10 feet under our property. So those are the two things that I think need to be addressed, maybe by shortening the hours of construction and also by having some kind of barrier during construction to keep the dust from coming into our property.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Norm Burke. I own a condo at 1700 Civic Center Drive, third floor. It faces the proposed development. I greatly appreciate the community meeting that we had. It was very helpful addressing some of our concerns. Nonetheless, concerns still remain. On-street parking is very competitive, and additional units are certainly going to impact that. Also, currently there are several large trees on our property that help to block the potential impact on our privacy. My concern is that those trees may be affected by the construction, trimmed or damaged in some ways. Also, having residential units back there as opposed to commercial, which are vacant at night, noise and privacy certainly can be impacted. There is going to be an HOA. May I suggest that we have some kind of contact with that to address potential noise problems. And also, value of my property is a concern. Right now, I enjoy a very nice view, and with third floor unit and three-story properties, my view will certainly be impacted by that. And as I mentioned, our privacy, our pool area, and my view will be impacted, so I am concerned about the effect on my property values. When I bought the unit, none of that was there. It was commercial. I didn't expect residential units to be built through a zoning conversion, and I will be impacted by that. Thank you.
The tree that you mentioned, is that on your condo side?
There's actually 3 or possibly 4 trees. They're old. They're fairly substantial. They are on our property, but they extend over onto the proposed development property. And I'm not sure if they're going to be trimmed or,
Okay, well, let's ask the applicant. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Felipe Carrillo. I live at 1700 Civic Center Drive, and I cannot highlight enough the parking situation that we have currently. So the addition of these units is just going to make it worse, I believe, as I understand that there will be 24 parking spots for the units and then 5 extra ones. But I cannot stress enough how bad the parking situation right now is. And just having a party, having some people come over for an evening or whatnot, which just brings so many more vehicles into the community, this specific area. And again, right now, it's very difficult to park if you do not have your own assigned parking spot. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to hear this over and over. So I really would like for you to consider that situation, this situation that we have right now, in making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners, we have a critical housing problem. I have a home, most of you have a home, and we need to think of our children. My son here, Paul, who's getting married on Saturday, who's starting a family soon.
Congratulations.
He would love to buy a project. He's submitted his name into the city's affordable housing program, and affordable housing is just a little under $96,000. But if we do not build housing, he will not have the same housing opportunity that I had when I moved into the city. We need to build housing, and we need to build it close to transit. This is on the low end of what was proposed for the site in the general plan. He wants a site where he can take transit to the train station, which we took several times together up to San Francisco. He Ubered over here today, avoiding having to drive himself. And for the residents that are around here, I understand their complex by themselves may not be large enough to support a Zipcar, but we should have a policy in our city that the two adjacent townhomes that are also tri-levels and the senior complex share in the cost of a Zipcar. They're all in close proximity to each other. They should pool their resources and get a Zipcar and free up 6 or 7 parking spaces. I would also like to see the city move up a plan, even if it's only partial bike lanes along the El Camino, to allow people to take a bike from this site to the train station. Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity and providing this forum. My name is Brian Didier. I'm the property manager at 1700 Civic Center Drive that borders this project. My wife and I also live in the building. We have lived in Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara for about the past 15 years, though she longer than I before we got married. And us moving closer and closer to work, she's a registered nurse at Kaiser Hospital, takes into consideration not only the travel time with traffic, but also the time it takes to find a parking space as we get closer to work. So actually the project seems really nice. No one is going to disagree that there's a need for additional housing in the city or this area. That's the nature of a growing city. But the problem is actually not with the development, but maybe with the tragically low parking requirements of these projects. Why are you not requiring the developers to build more parking? The streets are already full. The shadow study that he showed up here earlier actually proves our point. At 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., you look at all the cars on the street still. It's full already in the middle of the week. On the weekends and at night, it's worse. There are no parking spaces available on those streets around there. Scott is filling up. Warburton is filling up all the way and across on the western side of Scott. The parking situation is tragic. Please require the developers to build some more parking. We're very happy that they moved the park to the back of the project to allow more view and not block in the pool, but perhaps they could build some underground parking. That would ensure adequate spaces for all of the residents, plus guests, which are a concern. If you want to have people over for dinner, there's never any place to park. Who doubts that the guest parking spaces will be filled by the residents? Never any guests. Just thank you for your time and consideration of this. There's no parking already.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to read mine. I live just a block away. I I'm Joe Garcia. I live just a block away, and sad to see Fuji's florists move on, but glad to see that there was some real thought into the project. Based on the shortage of housing and increase in job growth, it's essential we create new developments that make sense. The design is very appealing and doesn't seem to be overblown by current standards. Having people close to their job will help minimize traffic by getting them home quicker at a quicker pace and off the road. Being close to the transit only adds to the appeal of the project. It's promising to see that each new development is required to create affordable housing. Developments like this will allow our children a chance to stay in the city where they were raised. I myself have 3 boys, and I'm hopeful that they will be given the opportunity to make this a reality. My oldest, being 27, did purchase his first home, but unfortunately, Santa Clara was out of reach. It would be nice to see him away from the commute so he can spend some quality time with his family and his career, which is close. I'm fairly confident that the job market will continue to grow and we will need for even more development similar in nature. The fact that these homes are new and owner-occupied will only increase the value and desirability of the neighborhood. There is a very different feel when people own their homes in the neighborhood, especially in small communities such as this. It's refreshing to have neighbors that care and look out for one another. The need for permanent housing is essential if we're going to keep our job situation stable and growing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Vernon Netter. I'm a real estate lender, residential real estate lender. I work with buyers all day long that are struggling to find a home. There isn't enough housing. So I thought I'd come to this meeting and mention that. I love this project. I know some of my buyers are interested in this project, and I hope you go through with it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alexander Dalkey. I live in the 4th floor, and I looked at a number of units when I first came to live there in 2004, and the one I saw, this one, I looked out the window, I saw it green, peaceful, and gentle. If they build this thing, it's not going to be green, not very gentle, and I don't think it's going to be very peaceful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm Nancy Bruninger Dalkey. I also live in 1700 Civic Center Drive. I want to compliment the person that's trying to incorporate the buildings now. He's done a very nice job of hearing us and making some adjustments. However, in the process with Rebecca, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, the assistant planner has told us that some of this information is based on 2008 plans. And as someone aptly pointed, you had a recession in 2008. So are you using something more current than 2008 to assess water, sewage, garbage disposal, traffic impact as we're talking about here? Since we've been living here 10 years, it's like multiplied by, in the last 8 months, it's been like a cycle of going faster and faster and faster. So my concern is, how often are you reviewing the older plans, and how is that assessing, how are you starting to build in new information, even as other kinds of considerations happen, where there's other corporations coming in, building more people, if Google comes in, if Apple comes in, all those kinds of things. If you thought of plans in 2008, I mean, that's really pretty old. So,
pardon for interrupting, but what are we talking about, 2008 plan?
Could you explain, are you saying the traffic generation that's?
Because we asked when this was first, she said that the information that was, the planning that was taking place in this particular lot was based on plans made in 2008 within Santa Clara.
I think you might be referring to the general plan. It was adopted in 2010.
Okay.
So the density range was established at that time when the council adopted the entire general plan for the city.
Okay, but I mean, in the last 8 years, this place has changed from a small town to a municipal city. And that's a great deal of difference from an outsider's viewpoint. Okay, this is only the brief information we've been given. This is only consideration I'm just asking about.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
if I could just respond, the general plan actually is for, from 2010, it projects out land uses and potential development to 2035. So it isn't just a single year or a short period, it's up to 2035.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, we're done here. Thank you. Yes, please.
My name is Sandor Fazekas. I live in 1700 Civic Center Drive. I'm an owner and occupant over there. And we are against the rezoning of that portion of the city, and because we don't want that development there. Their backyard and ours is separated only by a fence, and our swimming pool is there. We are afraid that there will be more noise, more air pollution, car exhaust gas, and less privacy there, and there will be more traffic on the street. So from our viewpoint, it is inconvenient. So it is against our interest, so to speak. So that's why I speak up, and I said I'm against the rezoning of the city and that project.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hello, commissioners. Nice to be here again. Again, I've lived here some non-zero percentage of my life. So I'm going to say this, which is just a point of order. If you're interrupting people that come here to speak during their time, I feel like you should give them additional time to complete their thoughts. It's just it's a request. Again, this is the only chance that they get to speak on the project, and it's only 2 minutes. I think at some point it is a good thing. It's just polite, especially when you're interrupting them, to let them finish their thoughts. I hear about these projects all the time. A lot of people know that I talk about these projects all the time. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Commissioner Jane did mention that there were 3-bedroom apartments, and the bedrooms are basically master bedrooms, right? I think there was 1 master bedroom and 2, I forgot what they called, long bedrooms or something like that. But that implies to me that there may be 3 different individuals, perhaps different families, different people with jobs, with different travel needs. And at that point, 3 times 12 doesn't fit into 24. Again, I understand that not everyone will have a car, and I hope that a lot of people use transit, municipal transit, and public transit. But at the same time, this is not the time where people can just take a bus to their work anymore, because people don't live just down the street from their work. They often live a couple cities away from their work, and it's not convenient, especially when you have children. I'd like to know why, if we're changing this to residential, why we're not choosing a residential zoning designation for this. I just want to know what the difference is, what residential zoning designation would fit this project, and why isn't it going there? I feel like it is maybe too tall, but I'd like to know what the differences are between this project and a project that would be proposed in something that was zoned for housing.
Thank you.
I worked on that general plan. I know it very well.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Rittenhouse. I'm also a resident at 1700. Just to reiterate the concerns that have already been expressed with the, with the parking, with the zoning. The previous person who just spoke, I think, mentioned some very valid points. It has been mentioned several times about being close to transit. I'm not exactly sure what transit you're talking about. I know there's Caltrans over there, but I know most people do not walk over there and take it. It's at least a mile away. So everyone's going to need a car just to get around. I don't know if you've already taken into consideration with this project of all the other high density buildings that have been going on all along El Camino. We've got another one going in right where the car wash was at. All that's going to also demand all that street parking. on Civic Center around the corner, where our parking is already going down Civic Center where it never did before, all along Lincoln right here in the evenings. All that's getting taken up by the residents. It's going to be a huge problem, just like he said. There's no way that it's just going to be 2 people who are going to park in the garage and 5 guest spots that are going to meet the needs of the parking. It's going to be a huge burden. You've talked about housing. I know it's needed, absolutely, but it's affordable housing. I don't know what these are going for. I don't know if they're going to be deemed affordable or not by all those who want to live in the area. I'm not sure what the pricing is going to be on that. I don't know if it's actually going to meet that need or not, but that's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So can I ask you a quick question? So you're on Civic Center Drive, right? Which does not, like, you have to go around, all the way around to like Civic Center Drive from this property to your home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you think people from this, if this were to be approved, do you think people from this condo could drive all the way around to your drive to park on your street, or what's the situation?
They'll be Civic Center, all down Warburton, Cross Scott, all up and down Lincoln here. We're already, with all the development, the new townhouses and stuff that went on down there, they're parking in the parking lots, where the offices are at. They're parking in the parking lots in the occupational center. It's everywhere. There's no parking.
And the condo that you live in, you have like 2 parking per unit? There isn't. What's the parking situation?
1 parking per unit, I think, or maybe 2. 1 parking per bedroom.
1 parking per bedroom.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, and some of your units are 1 bedroom?
There's a majority 1 bedroom, and there's some 2-bedroom units.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, would the applicant like to rebut? 5 minutes.
All right, just like to go down the list of a few notes that I just made on some of the concerns that I heard. The first gentleman, I don't remember his name. He had mentioned that he's really close to the project site. And probably about 10 feet away was his guesstimate from his backyard to the property line. A few notes on that. Our property is actually at an elevation of about 70 feet or so. And the 1700 Civic Center Drive is on a kind of an elevated pad. Per the survey that I was looking at just now, it's about 77 feet. So they're already at a height. So I don't know if the gentleman lives in the first floor unit or something higher than that. So there's already an elevation change, creating some distance. Plus our side setback right now currently is set at 15 feet. So there'd be a minimum of 25-foot distance between the footprint of the building, of the rear unit, and that residence. Yes, construction definitely has impacts, that are unavoidable. But the goal is to always come in efficiently and get the units up. And once you're working on the interior of the units, typically the reduction in noise is significant. As far as I think something about dust was mentioned as well, there's always dust control by watering during any type of earthwork or grading activities on the site. That's pretty common. That's within building code, and you can get red tagged for that if you don't follow it. So a lot of people mentioned parking. In order to also look at different ways to address the parking, I had a conversation with a gentleman next door to our project. His name is Mr. Nick Casper. He's the director over at the Chamber of Commerce next door to the site. And what we noticed was, as we've visited the site quite a few times, that there's quite a bit of parking there. And even though they do have other tenants that they lease out some of those units for in that condo building over there, Mr. Casper was pretty, he was pretty open to having a conversation with us for whether some type of overflow parking that's managed by the HOA of the future development, but providing parking permits, whether it's during the seasonal, like holidays, or on weekends when somebody has a barbecue and they want to provide parking to their guests above and beyond what's already on site. And he seemed pretty amiable to listen to us and coming up with a solution, because he also agreed that there is some availability of parking on their site. Nothing's been set in stone, but more than willing to work towards that conversation with Mr. Casper to at least provide a few parking passes or some type of agreement with them with the HOA. That way, when people do have guests and people are utilizing not only their own 2 parking spots, but one of the 5 community parking spots, some of that overflow can go over to the site next door, and especially when a lot of people usually are entertaining on weekends. Typically, that parking lot should be empty on a weekend because it houses businesses. So there's definitely a creative idea there that we've looked into, and it looks like it has some promise to help at least alleviate our specific impact into the further parking problem that everybody's addressing in this pocket. Trees, we've our goal is to also, if we can not deal with taking down a tree, we don't want to. It's beneficial to everybody. So with the gentleman who was mentioning the trees and the impact of their trees that are coming over on our property or close to the property, we'll work with them to make sure that we can maintain their health, their integrity, have an arborist come out, do the correct tree protection measures, and making sure that they're healthy through the construction process. And if any pruning or trimming is required, they'll have to be approved by both parties, on both sides. It wouldn't just be us coming in and trimming a tree. One of the gentlemen mentioned underground parking. For us, we're a small developer, and the economies of scale, we're not building 50 units, 100 units, we're building 12 units. For us on this type of site, it just wouldn't fiscally make any sense to do underground parking. Another gentleman mentioned the bedroom, bathroom. Given, we do a market analysis of what people are looking to buy, even families today. The product type today, whether we have a bathroom for each bedroom, that's a huge bonus. That's a huge plus. A lot of people like that with older kids. So for us to provide that bathroom is actually a benefit. I don't take that as a negative or conducive to trying to get people to rent their units out. That's not the intent there. Also, one thing I didn't mention was during the community hearing, height kept on coming up. And, our units are 3 stories, just like majority of the units behind us, including the Shade project, which was approved, about 150 units. To our left are 3-story units. The condo building is 7 stories tall. To our right, the office building is 30 feet tall. So we even went, and I worked with my architect to actually reduce the height even a further foot down. To get it down to where we still have mechanical equipment up top if we need it, and still feasibly build a good project. So I try to address, at least respond to some of the questions that people had, and I'm more than willing to meet with everybody, to further look into some of these items.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Any questions to the applicant? Okay. Motion to close public hearing?
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all right. Discussions. Oh, are we using the panel now? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Becker.
All right, so this brings up a lot of questions for me. I'm sorry. Regarding the parking, we cannot turn into the city of San Jose. As I worked for Uber a couple years ago and I did deliveries, parking is a major, major issue. I can't find any parking in San Jose. Over here in Santa Clara, I'm starting to realize that we're starting to get to the same situation. I'm hearing everybody talk about parking. Mr. Park said 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 3 is 36 spots. So my question is, how are we going to have more parking for people when you have more tenants living in these places? Because I know a lot of people that are renting, a lot of people that will rent a room inside of an apartment, sharing the load of the cost of rent. In my apartment complex alone, we have 61 units. I did research recently. Out of the 61 units, 56 units have people that drive cars. Of those people that drive cars, there are multiple people that live in these units that drive multiple cars. We are guaranteed in my apartment complex 2 parking spots. But recently, with the addition of the expansion of the whole San Tomas situation and they put the new red lights in, we are now going to lose 4 parking spots. The discussion now is, are we going to have to pay now for our extra parking spots? This cannot keep happening. The parking situation is, I think, outrageous. And in continuing with the parking situation, if we have 5 spots, where is anyone going to park? I like the idea, though, of where the Chamber of Commerce is, that there will be an opportunity maybe to have that happen. But it's not a guarantee. And that is something that we need to figure out if it's a guarantee. Another thing I have to talk about is what Mr. Park had brought up. My question also is, why is this planned development and not residential? This was office, I believe, right? So why can't we put this as a residential zoning? But is it too tall? Is that the question?
Okay, well, let's ask that to the staff.
Okay, I'll get there. So that is a question I do have for staff on that situation. But my thing is why are we so? I feel like why are we car shaming people? I mean, a lot of us do own cars, and I am for.
Sure.
Can I finish my topic, please?
I understand, but
Thank you.
yes, you've spoke so many times about parking already, so.
Let me finish my topic thing.
Sure.
Okay, so where was I? Sorry. Parking. How can we? I mean, we're cutting back on our parking situation in the city, and I just really want to see that we have enough parking because I know that we keep shrinking the size of everything that we're involved in lately. And I want millennials, I want people to use public transit, I want people to get out, take Uber, whatever. But not all of us can do that. I can't do it. And, I'm saying that half the people in here that are speaking, I don't think they can do the same thing either. So, based on all this, it's just too small of an area for me. I'm for the housing, but it's just too small.
But this project already meets the parking requirements, and we want to, limit our discussion to this specific project. So are you suggesting that you add more parking? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that's what I'm saying is that I'm suggesting we include more parking because it seems like we had a line of people here tonight that complained about the parking issue. I've been in their neighborhood on Civic.
So can the city legally require the developer to add more parking? Yes, we can. I see. All right. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Any other points that you'd like to make?
My question is that if we do take a chance at, I've been on Civic Center, and Civic Center at those times that they do declare that it is hard to find parking, is incredibly hard to find parking. So my thing is that yes, we should ask them, the developer, to include more parking, or like he said, we work with the Chamber of Commerce and we get a parking agreement to go on that will benefit everybody in the neighborhood, including the original residents. Because honestly, we got to think more and more about the original residents than inviting new people to live here every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? Nobody else? Okay, I have questions. Let's address the other zoning options that Commissioner Becker and a member of the public asked. Why are we going for PD? Are there no other viable options?
All right, so the reason we moved to a PD, the Plan Development Zoning District, is because there are flexible standards involved under that zoning classification. Our code was adopted in 1969, so there are very limited choices if you want to have for sale product. all of our zoning districts for single family are R16L and R18L. That means you have to have at least 6,000 square feet per lot, but the main component of the single family or a for sale product is you have to have frontage, each unit on a public street. So it has to be independently accessed. You can't do it by easements. Anything of that nature requires a plan development. So this is a for sale product. The only other corresponding districts for higher density products are for rental only. So that's where you could have shared access and multiple units like apartment buildings, anything of that nature that isn't under separate ownership. A condominium would require the same thing.
Okay.
So that's our only option to implement the general plan is a plan development zoning district.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. So in order to to sell the property,
yes,
this is the only
To
zoning
subdivide,
option.
yes, without having frontage on a public street independently, we need a PD.
Thank you very much. All right, so I have a question about the arrangement that might be made with the Chamber of Commerce. Is that something that we can
Yes.
include
The
in our
The
condition?
city, as a result, developed an off-site parking permit as a result of the implementation of the stadium. So we can issue those anywhere in town, but we have to have the agreement. It has to be a viable option, say, for off-peak parking times. And so if there was a parking agreement, that could be renewed annually. So that's something that could be pursued.
And if that building where the chamber is right now gets redeveloped, then what happens?
It's going to be like anything else. It's going to go away, or it'd have to be renegotiated with the new owner. But if it was redeveloped, you're right, it would not be feasible then. So then that
With
option
no
would be
extra
not
parking
available.
space, then that option will go away.
Right. It would have to be something like if there's any business, I don't know what all the businesses in that little commercial district on the corner, there are some that open. There's a liquor store. Some of those businesses,
Yeah.
if it's possibly overflow in the off-peak hours, but probably not very reasonable to assume that.
Okay. Now, I understand the neighbor's statement about parking because I go there all the time. I come here all the time. I know how bad the parking is. Commissioner Chahal and I volunteer at an organization that has meetings on the HI house, and the parking is just not there. So I understand and I sympathize, but what are the practical solutions? Because we need housing, and we're running out of parking. So what about like the parking? 2-hour parking limitations. We've recommended other neighborhoods to look into that. Is that something that we can recommend the neighbors to look into for this, for Warburton and Civic Center Drive?
Yes, there is some timed parking along Lincoln, and there is, I think, some on a portion of Civic Center. But if they wanted to pursue additional restricted parking, again, the neighbors would need to petition the city to get that.
So basically, they need to get together and petition the city to implement the typically
some
kind of limited parking.
Right. They would have input on what the time frame would be.
Okay.
Or if it's permit parking only, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The meeting is closed to the public, to member from the member. We close the public hearing portion, so please refrain. Okay. So now one of the member of the public, Commissioner Kelly, Steve Kelly, mentioned sharing the cost of Zipcar. Does anyone know what we're talking about? What is the sharing the cost of Zipcar among several developments? Is Commissioner Kelly is Mr. Kelly still here? Would you like to elaborate on that, please?
Where they share the cost.
Okay. When I've gone to some of the presentations about using alternative means to free up parking, Zipcars have come up, and typically the number I've heard is about 350 units. Now, this project is small in scale, but there are multiple complexes all in that general area. And if they would get together and use their combined HOA resources, together they could get 1, maybe 2 zip cars. I know the senior complex would relish having a zip car because not everybody drives all the time when they're retired. So we keep thinking as parking as something that we need. What we really need is mobility. And mobility is to getting from point A to point B. Having a zip car in close proximity to where you live gives you mobility.
So I'm sorry, maybe I didn't make myself clear.
Okay.
What is the cost of zip car that the HOAs can share the burden of? How does that
It
work?
takes about 350 units. I would say.
Is it the cost of parking space or?
From what I've seen, a car, like a zip car is probably around 25,000, 30,000. So the shared cost of a car of around 30,000, maintenance is not going to be cost prohibitive when you're talking about 350 residents.
But doesn't the zip car pay for the car and the maintenance? And
Yeah, basically the HOA would pay a fee to zip car, and they would provide a car, and it could be in that general proximity.
I see. Okay, I understand. Thank you very much. All right. Any other questions? Okay, Commissioner Chahal.
So, coming back to the parking part of it, like I've been asking that how can residents get the 2-hour parking and the resident permit? Just for the explanation for the residents, can you please elaborate, like what's the process so that they can look into that option and go for it?
So through the Traffic Engineering Division, residents can request that they have a permit parking program on their block or neighborhood, and there's a process that it goes through, and it's approved through the city council, but it would just take a simple majority of the neighbors, I believe, to get that program. But it does take a little bit of time, but it's available to anyone upon request that they can go through the process. And
do you know how long does it take to put on the agenda, like a rough timeline as of now?
If the process has not changed, they have to do the survey first, so they send out notices, and they have to get consent from a certain majority of neighbors, and then they would go to council with the program and indicate the location of the restriction, and they have to actually adopt it through a resolution to say what the meets and bounds of where the restricted parking is, and then and the time frames.
Okay.
And then they would go through and issue the permits.
And it can be 24 hours, 2-hour limited, except for residential.
There's all kinds
permit.
of combinations. It could be two different time frames for daytime and evening. It could be all week long. It could be different times on the weekend. So it just depends on what the neighborhood wants.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Jane.
The world is changing. Autonomous cars, Uber, Lyft, they are basically getting people away from car ownership. I know right now there's a crisis on the street. I understand that if you drive less than 4,200 miles a year, it's actually cheaper to take Uber and Lyft for every one of your trips. If you Uber pool, that number is 9,200 miles. So if you drive less than 9,200 miles a year, if you took Uber pool for all of your trips, it would be cheaper than owning a car. We have a desperate need for housing in this city. Our jobs to housing ratio is 2.9, which is way out of balance. People are commuting from long distances. They're clogging our highways and our roads. The only solution is to actually have people own fewer cars. Now, we have this problem right now that those technologies aren't here quite yet, but they're coming fast. You can see all these self-driving cars, and when Uber and Lyft adopt those technologies, the cost of those services will be much cheaper than they are now. So the cost of a parking spot, a surface parking spot, this was on the council meeting last night, is $30,000 for a surface spot. The cost for a spot in a structure is $60,000. If you add that to the cost of each of these units, you make these units unaffordable to a large number of people in the city. And affordable housing and traffic, in my mind, are two of the major problems the city is facing.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Becker. Oh, okay. I know Commissioner Salem, sometimes I don't get to. Today. Okay, you know light from me. Okay, all right. So I guess we don't have any more questions or discussions. So do we have any motion?
I move to adopt or recommend to the City Council to adopt the mitigated negative declaration and the mitigated monitoring and reporting program for 1900 Warburton residential project.
Okay, any seconds? Any seconds? No seconds?
Second it because.
Wait, are you, I'm not hearing you. Are you seconding this motion?
Seconding the motion.
Okay, I didn't hear you. All right, understand. Okay, I have a question. The traffic, the Fuji Florist drew traffic because it was a commercial, it was a business. Compared with the traffic flow with that Fuji attracted and what the traffic that this project is expect, how do they compare? I looked at the report and I couldn't really tell.
Big generation from.
Give me 1 second. I'm just going to flip through the initial study and get the numbers.
I was going to ask this earlier, but I have so many things to go through. Oh, okay. Yes, Commissioner Chao.
So I did read the traffic one. It generates 70 trips, this development, but they did not mention how much traffic the Fuji Florist is generating. So right. They did not mention anything about it. I didn't read about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Unless they have some different study which mention about the Fuji Florist.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, because a lot of times when you're replacing a business with a residential, I've seen a situation like that many times, and oftentimes it's less traffic, but I wanted to know.
Yeah, so the study does give the project credit for the existing commercial business and then does establish 70 daily traffic trips from the proposed project and concludes that there would be 5 trips during AM peak and 6 trips during the PM peak, and that there would be no substantial traffic impact based on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more questions? Yes, all right, Commissioner Salem.
Yes, hi. Is Commissioner Jane open to a friendly amendment?
Well,
Can you explain?
Yeah, please.
I would like to amend the motion to include a required investigation of off-site permit parking as a part of this process. Not that it's a guarantee that it was established, but at least made the effort and reported on the results to guarantee that at least due diligence was done to mitigate the traffic or mitigate the extra parking issues.
Okay,
so I am sympathetic to that.
Thank you. Staff Fazla, would this be the correct? Should we attach that requirement on the MND or on the other portion, the rezoning?
I think it would be appropriate for the second motion.
Second motion,
yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so 4-1, motion still carries. All right, do you have a second motion?
I move that that we recommend to council to approve the rezoning from general office to planned development to allow residential development consisting of 12 townhouse units at 1900 Warburton Avenue with the provision that the applicant work with the chamber to work out an agreement to use the extra parking off hours.
Okay, I second that, and I like to add several other items. Well, add a few more things. That there be a requirement that the guest parking always be kept available, that the residents don't use it as a regular parking space. That be included in as part of the HOA, whatever you call it, and that the garage space in each unit be also always be made available for parking, and that it not be used for storing stuff. And that the HOA contact be made, be posted for the neighbors. If neighbors feel that their parking spaces, that these parking requirements are not being met, that the neighbors have somebody to contact. Would you accept those changes, Commissioner Jane?
Chair Casey, just for clarification, that was a friendly amendment to Commissioner Jane's motion?
Yes, yes.
I believe that there was already a condition that the
Yes.
garages be available.
be maintained open.
Okay, so we don't need to add that, okay.
So I'm amenable to the idea that the guest parking be
Guest parking be always be available.
Not used for on a daily basis.
And that the HOA contact be posted for neighbors.
We could have that striped or printed as guest parking. So it's actually says it there on as a stamp or either that or a sign, so it doesn't, there's no confusion.
Oh, okay.
That's good, yeah.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion on the floor. Any discussions?
I'm
Yes,
sorry, was there a
Commissioner Chahal.
second?
Oh, yes.
Was there a second to the motion?
I second with the friendly amendment.
I don't think.
Okay, I think a second should be made to the motion with the friendly amendment.
Right. Any second to the friendly amendment?
I'll second that as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Chahal.
Just want to make a couple of points, like the project itself is, as everybody mentioned, many people mentioned, we have a housing needs in the city. And this place can go 20 dwelling units per acre, and the developer is not going full 20 dwelling units, is going down. And if we take remedial measures as mentioned for the parking, and believe me, we all are facing that parking problem, but somehow we have to build housing units where we can and with the least the problem to the existing residents. And I don't disagree that parking for the existing resident will be an issue, but let's explore the 2-hour parking and the resident parking permits. With all that, I'll be supporting that motion on this.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to mention, since Commissioner Becker joined us recently, that you do have an option to make an amendment to propose additional parking requirements if you still choose to. And if you can gain support of your fellow commissioners, then that will be subject to a vote. Just to let you know. Okay. All right, so any more discussions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, 4-1, motion carries. All right, do we have another motion?
Yes. I would like to recommend to the City Council that we approve the tentative condominium map for the property located at 1900 Warburton Avenue to divide the 0.55 acre project site into 12 condominium units on a common lot.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, any discussions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, 4-1, motion carries. Okay, so we went through the recommendations, and if you want to appeal on what this to this action, if you want to appeal the action, you please do so in writing within 7 calendar days.
No, this is not an appealable
Oh, this is
action
a
because
recommendation.
Planning Commission is the
Oh, okay.
recommending body. So
That's
this
right.
will be moving forward to City Council
Oh.
in July for a final decision.
Okay, thank you. That's right. So this item will be taken up at the City Council in July. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item. Okay. All right, next item is 18-252. Are we ready to move on to the next item? Okay, public hearing on action on the mixed-use project located at 575 Benton Street.
Chair Casey?
Yes.
This item was heard before us at our last Planning Commission meeting, and I recused myself because of my involvement with a Franklin Street easement. So
Okay.
I will recuse myself again tonight.
Okay, thank you. And I like to make a disclosure that I met with a representative of the Old Quad Association and from the applicant.
As did I.
As did I. Oh, good.
I just want to make a disclosure. I didn't met the developer, but I did attend Old Quad and Downtown Reclamation Revitalization Committee meeting only. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes.
Oh,
I wanted to let everyone know that I did also speak with a member of the Old Quad and the Old Quad Association, as well as members of the Reclaiming Downtown Group and a member of Prometheus.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would the staff like to?
Chair Casey, just a reminder that at the last meeting, the public hearing was closed and then reopened, and right now we're at the public hearing portion for this item right now. And so any comments about the commissioner's opinions about the project should wait until after close of the public hearing.
Okay, right. Okay, so are we going to go through the report and again? I mean, it hasn't has it changed since last time?
So we just have some clarification because you commissioners had some questions. So we
Okay.
added some clarification and I would try to go over it fast.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So as we know, the project includes general plan amendment, rezoning, approval of vesting tentative map, and approval of the DA. Several community meetings have been arranged since June 2016 with community members such as Old Quad Resident Association. Following those meetings, the project applicant modified the project design to the project architectural style to a historic industrial area that has been converted to residential use based on Old Quad Residents Association suggestion. About 45 members of the community were present at our last community meeting in July, and since then the project design has not changed. At the community meeting, community members requested Prometheus to work and cooperate with city in order to restore Franklin Street, and since then the applicant is working with the city to come up with an option agreement. And as discussed before and in the staff report, the project is in compliance with the general plan policies and Plan Bay area. So focus areas in the general plan are important components of the general plan, which provide